right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this March 18th meeting of the Somerville School Committee. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2024, this meeting of the school committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. With that, Superintendent, will you call the roll?
Yes, good evening, everyone. And this is the roll call. Ms. Barish.
Here.
Mayor Ballantyne.
Present.
President Owen Campen. Mr. Green.
Here.
Mr. Bitton.
Here.
Ms. Bitton.
Present.
Dr. Ackman.
Here.
Dr. Phyllis.
Here.
Chair Krebsen.
Here.
Thank you. We have a forum.
We will have a moment of silence and a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic from which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will now have our interpreters introduce themselves. I will start with Spanish.
Good evening, everyone. This is Tracy Pichardo, Spanish interpreter. I will give a brief introduction for the Spanish channel. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Tracy Pichardo, seré su intérprete de español. Esta noche, para escuchar la reunión, haga un clic en el globo de la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccione el idioma como el español. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. And Portuguese? We'll come back to Portuguese. Haitian Creole, if you could introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Henji Supri. I'll be the Haitian Creole interpreter for tonight. Bonsoir tout le monde. Non, c'est Angie. M'a interprété pour nous en créole haïtien. Si le besoin créole haïtien, choisis Glo Blanc par écran et puis sélectionnez français. Merci.
Thank you. And Portuguese?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sueli de Carne, and I will be your Portuguese interpreter tonight. Boa noite a todos. Meu nome é Sueli de Carne e eu serei a intérprete de português essa noite.
Great, thank you. And I don't believe our student reps are here, so we will come back if they are able to make it. We have one approval of minutes to do, and then we'll move on to public comment. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes for January 8th, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Mr. Green. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to public comment. Before we begin, I will read our policy on public comment. Welcome and thank you to those who have signed up for public comment. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present their material. However, the chair may limit to 2 minutes based on the number of individuals signed up to speak, and given the number of individuals tonight, we will be limiting it to 2 minutes. Speakers should begin their comments by stating their name and address, or in the case of district employees, their role within the district. The chair of the meeting, after a warning, reserves the right to terminate speech which is not constitutionally protected because it constitutes true threats that are likely to provoke a violent reaction and cause a breach of the peace, or incitement to imminent lawless conduct, or which contains obscenities. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between the public and the committee. Members of the committee will not reply to public comment in the course of the meeting, though individual members may follow up, and items from public comment may be taken up in future meetings. The school committee will not hear personal complaints of school personnel, nor against any member of the school community in public session. Individuals may address topics on the agenda or items within the school committee's scope of responsibility, such as the district budget, goals and policies, or the role of the superintendent. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing for inclusion inclusion in the public record. So I will start with the public commenters that are here in the room, and then we will do public commenters on Zoom. And I will list the 3 people in line, just so you know where you're coming. So we will start with Uma Marugan, then Cassie Walston, and then Will Bosworth. And please, if I pronounce your name incorrectly, correct me when you come up. So, Uma?
Good evening. Uma Murugan, 17 Madison Street, parent and president of the Winter Hill PTA. There are 403 students at Winter Hill. 56 are AIM students entitled to buses under federal law. Families of the remaining 347 students were offered free transportation this year. Only 81 used the service. That's just 23% of eligible students. Free buses that cost taxpayers $180,000 have been allowed to run half empty all year. Why are families living in public housing left to pay $40 per child per week in cash for privately operated shuttles? Why are Brazilian families paying for 2 or 3 vans at $70 to $100 per child per week to get their kids to the elderly? Why is a working single mom in Ward 2 left to fend for themselves? The location of the one bus stop on Sycamore privileges our wealthiest families. Meanwhile, far too many struggling families are stranded without the supports they need. For example, the walk from the Mystics to the bus on Sycamore takes as long as the walk directly to school. Our school has students from 5 different wards. To make free busing inclusive, comprehensive, and equitable, we need bus stops in all 5 wards. The immense costs of such transportation must not become an ever-increasing burden on the school budget for the next 5 to 7 years. The top budget priority for SPS must be to preserve ESSER staff and supports. The SPS is bound by its duty to public education. Crossing McGrath and Broadway to get kids to our school is not a new phenomenon. Transportation and safe routes to school have always been the city's responsibility. We have asked PTA members to attend the budget hearing tomorrow to make safe and free transportation to the elderly a city budget priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Cassie Walston, Will Bosworth, and then Jody Nusser-Abrahams. Cassie?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair and School Committee, for hearing me. My name is Cassie Walston. I live at 134 Preble Street, and I'm the parent of a 3rd grader at the Winter Hill. So we've been at Winter Hill since kindergarten, and we've always lived far from the Sycamore Street location. First, we lived in Ball Square, and now East Somerville. When I found out that we'd be at the Edgerly this year, I was actually relieved. Being closer to school has made it easier for me to manage my son's chronic absenteeism, tardiness, and school anxiety. However, the success we've seen with his improving attendance this year has mostly been thanks to Winter Hill staff who have gone above and beyond and out of their way to help our family. Meanwhile, family supportive services and academic supports are stretched thin from what I can see. And our school hasn't had a break from triaging individual student and family needs. We're also facing a chronic absenteeism problem across our district and nationally. But going back to the issue of school commutes, it's unacceptable for the school district to pay for busing when the burden of restorative justice should be on the city. It's my personal opinion that if the school gets any infusion of money, it should go to special ed and family supportive services. But please don't just take it from me. We need school committee on the ground and face-to-face with our families and teachers. Our principal and the staff at the school have done well advocating for us. They have the pulse of the school, but they can't continue to be the only ones liaising between families and the city. That's why I'm asking everyone on school committee to join our PTA as members so that we can invite you to our next general body meeting. Let that be the first step in hearing from our community. You can sign up and pay your dues at winterhillpta.org. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I have Will Bosworth, then Jody Nusser, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, and then Kate St. Laurent. Will?
Hi, good evening. Will Bosworth, 18 James Street. I'm a parent of 2 Winter Hill students. In the school committee's FY24 budget presentation, which I found on your website, you all stated 4 main goals for the year: equitable access to programming and equitable resource allocation were 2 of those. The Winter Hill School community does not have equitable access or resource allocation today. We do not have a school building for the Winter Hill School. 9 months since we lost our building, we do not have a commitment or a clear vision on how it will be replaced. The Edgerly building is not a complete solution, and it is not equitable to a full school building without further investment and support. It is still harder for Winter Hill teachers and parents to get all of the students into the classroom and learning every day than at other schools. Recently, the city announced a very straightforward compliance issue might delay bringing pre-K and K classes over to the Edgerly. Dividing the students and teachers across 2 different school buildings is not an equitable replacement for a complete school community. The Winter Hill School is the only school in the district that does not have robust after-school programs for their students. We don't get chess, girls who code, or foreign language classes. The city, the school district, and the school committee need to take more direct action to ensure that the Winter Hill School community has the resources that every other school has. The response should be more attention, not more excuses for why this school gets less. Please stop accepting pervasive inequity to the Winter Hill School as a budget line item. Please accelerate the investments in the school this year, and please do not wait another 18 months to decide how to replace this school building. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Jody Nusser-Abrams, Kate St. Laurent, and then Gwyneth Davies. Jody?
Hi, everyone. It's Jody Nemser-Abrahams.
Thank you.
80 Hinckley Street. I just want to start by saying that today has been a really hard day. Some days have been harder and some days have been easier, but today has been really hard. I'm a Winter Hill parent of a current first grader and a pre-K student, and then a future pre-K or future Winter Hill student. But instead of being home right now putting my kids to bed, I am here advocating for our school. And I would just wish it wasn't like we didn't have to keep fighting for our school. I'm actually going to read an email that I sent today to Dr. Carmona and CC'd several of you who are in the room, including the mayor. I'm going to speak quickly so I can read the whole thing. Dear Dr. Carmona, I'd like to request that an emergency in-person open format Q&A meeting be scheduled for families and staff for the Winter Hill with you and Mayor Ballantyne to be held ASAP, ideally early next week. I understand that this may be a big ask, but read on to understand the urgency. In the last few weeks, this is a bullet point list, the meeting about the future of Edgerly was canceled, but not rescheduled, and no explanation was given for the cancellation. Second thing, we got an email from the city about the formation of an advisory group to help decide where the new school should be with a timeline of 18 months. Third thing, an email was sent to the community, the Winter Hill community, about the issues with the cost of renovations for Edgerly to modify the boxing club for pre-K and K for the next school year, with a message of, we're trying everything we can to keep our community together. Staff were told that pre-K and K wouldn't be at the Capuano for the next year, and I heard this secondhand from teachers. Rising K families were called by the enrollment office to give them the opportunity to switch schools from Winter Hill. This was the first call that we heard that pre-K and K would definitely be at the Capuano, although we haven't gotten any official communication stating this. We also found out from the enrollment office that there were only 17 students enrolled for kindergarten. Oh, I'm out of time. Okay, and busing. I hope that you will consider this, and including the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Gwyneth Davies, Kara Dodd, and then Lindsay Weaver. Gwyneth. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Kate.
Hi, Kate St. Laurent, 59 Albion Street. I have 2 kids at the Winter Hill School, currently in kindergarten and 2nd grade. There are a lot of things I really want to say right now. But instead, I'm going to say the things which I need to say to advocate for the kids and the teachers at the Winter Hill Community Innovation School. We need a rescheduled meeting immediately. We at least need a date for it. If it is not next week, we need it immediately. We need creative solutions for fixing the Edgerly. I have reached out to both of our state reps, and they basically have told me that they are on board to help if the city can come up with a plan. Again, I don't know what the roadblock is here. We need equity in the free after-school programs for Winter Hill. There are a lot of people who would make use of them. And I really think we need to rethink the 18-month advisory hold to evaluate how we're going to spend the MSBA funding. You heard us loud and clear. I'm pretty sure every single parent who has been in every room has told you what we want. And with that, thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Gwyneth Davies, Cara Dodd, and then Lindsay Weaver.
Good evening. I'm Gwyneth Davies, second grade teacher at Winter Hill. Several months ago, during a meeting with city officials, Winter Hill staff were told that the city was committed to rebuilding our trust. We were told that the city would rebuild our trust like marbles in a jar, one marble at a time. This image came to mind as I reflected on our most recent building developments. To hear that the mayor's promise to renovate the boxing club was being reneged was more than the loss of one marble. It was as if someone had thrown the jar on the floor, marbles ricocheting across the room, rolling over shattered glass and into unreachable places, irretrievable. I begin this way because I think it is so important for you to know that this latest setback is an immense violation of what was a fragile but hopeful trust. If this city and this mayor fail to understand the urgency of our situation, they risk losing some of the best and brightest educators, along with the cherished students and families of our school. Not a day goes by that I don't hear a colleague saying something about leaving. What the staff, students, and families of Winter Hill have been put through is simply not acceptable. I urge this committee to use all available avenues to advocate fiercely for the total reunification of the Winter Hill School, including all programs, or risk irreparably destroying a unique and vibrant community that is a lifeline to so many. In closing, I will say that I am so very tired of feeling angry, and that I am just tired, period. But I'm here tonight because I'm a fighter, and because I know that our students are worth fighting for, and I think you know that too. I'm asking you to continue to fight for us, please, with everything you have, and with the same energy that we bring to our students every day. And I'm asking you to make it your business to ensure that we are not shattered and scattered like a jar of marbles falling to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Cara Dodd and then Lindsay Weaver. Cara, the floor is yours.
Good evening. My name is Cara Dodd. I'm a Ward 5 resident and educator at Winter Hill. Back in the 1960s, my grandfather became the first male president of a PTA in Somerville when he was infuriated to discover that my aunt's first grade classroom was being taught in the boiler room of the Hodgkins School. There's a video I discovered from 1971 on the Digital Commonwealth Archive. In that video, families in the Winter Hill neighborhood stand around in disbelief of the conditions their children have been learning in. A mother says with frustration in her voice, "We would like to know why they put our children in conditions like this," as the camera pans to a dimly lit room where dust and debris covers desks. When Mayor Ballantyne says this is a legacy problem, she certainly isn't wrong. However, the legacy is continuing, and our community asks the same question. We would like to know why they're putting children in conditions like this. Conditions of uncertainty like we find ourselves in this very moment. We were promised that our school would be whole again by renovating the boxing club to bring pre-K and K classes to the Edgerly, and as we wait for the plan to rebuild. Yet educators, families, and city officials were surprised to discover that they cannot make improvements worth more than 30% of the budget's total value in this 3-year span. Each and every time we're told to trust the process or trust the city, there is harm and broken trust done to Winter Hill educators, students, and families. I've heard it said here that trust is built marble by marble. To grow the trust, it is vital that the city uphold the promise of completing the capital improvement projects that were planned to be done this summer. If Edgerly is going to be our home for the next 5 to 10 years, we need noise reduction work to be done. Sorry, I didn't realize how much time I have. As a special education teacher, I just see the way that the echoing distracts and takes away from time on learning. It means small group instruction is almost completely ineffective because it's impossible to focus on what's being said in classes when kids are speaking normal volume. It's dysregulating, and we know dysregulated students are not ready to learn. Educators and families continue to ask and have been asking for decades, why are they putting our children in conditions like this? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Lindsay Weaver.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Weaver. I'm a newcomer academy educator at the Winter Hill at Edgerly and a Somerville resident of 8 Ossipee Road. I also proudly serve as the SEU Vice President. SEU President Deshaw Simmons is not here tonight. He's at another community meeting, but I know he echoes these sentiments. To say that the educators of Winter Hill are frustrated would be an understatement. In the fall, we were promised that our community would be made whole by bringing the pre-K and K classes into the Edgerly after a summer of renovations of the boxing club. How is it possible that the city continues to make promises they never intend to keep? This has been a logistical nightmare for families with children at both Edgerly and Capilano. I see this firsthand as I assist the district in overseeing the students who receive transportation to and from the Edgerly each day. Whether or not the boxing club can be renovated, the city needs to hold true to the promise that the necessary capital improvements will be made to the building this summer, especially doing whatever is necessary to stop water from entering the building with each rainstorm. The Winter Hill educators suffered this issue at the building on Sycamore Street. To do nothing to rectify it at Edgerly speaks volumes to how much the city values the Winter Hill community. With the current state of the building, educators are dodging mice droppings, and other pests each day while trying to deliver the best instruction for kids. These working and learning conditions are absolutely horrible, and the SEU demands that the school committee work with the city to rectify this problem. We understand that not everything goes as planned. We understand that there are circumstances that are simply beyond anyone's control. It doesn't seem like this has to be one of those times. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have 4 people signed up for public comment on Zoom. So first, I have Melissa Moore, then Matthew Daniels, then Carrie Richmond, and then Erin Finney. So Melissa Moore, you're welcome to unmute yourself.
All right. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. My name is Melissa Moore, and I'm a middle school gen ed teacher at the Winter Hill Community Innovation School. I'm here to speak about the diverse Winter Hill community, the strength and beauty in our diversity, and the breach of trust we are feeling again due to the cities breaking their promise to make our community whole again. On Saturday, I attended the citywide soccer final, and it was a beautiful microcosm of our school community. The team consists of members from each program at our school, the AIM program, Newcomer Academy, and General Education. It was incredible to watch the team play, both on and off the court. Multiple languages were spoken, player to player and coach to player, showing that some of our newcomers are now trilingual, as they have learned new languages to be able to speak with their peers. Families, students, and teachers from each program were sitting side by side, cheering in support of the students. It was an absolute nail-biter, ending in penalty kicks, with Winter Hill coming out victorious. In my 5 years of teaching at Winter Hill, it was possibly the strongest I've ever felt our community. And yet, hours after the final, I faced the unacceptable possibility that due to the city's oversight, this team may not look like this again. I forced myself to imagine the team without our students from the AIM program or the Newcomer program. Our richness, our grit, our strength, it comes from being united, from being whole. Our students are some of the most vulnerable and precious in the city, yet in the past 5 years, our students have been moved 5 times, and now some of our students may be moved 6 times. I am tired of being consistently angry and disappointed by the lack of care with which the city seems to regard our community, our most precious students. Our trust has been broken, shattered, time and time again. We as a community urgently need an advocate, action, and a transparent, thought-through plan. We implore you to use your public platform to hold the city and the mayor to task to uphold your promises for once, to keep us together without the removal of any programs. I'm asking you to stand up for the community that you say you care so much about. For years, educators have been showing up for the Winter Hill community, needing to demand this district and city to do right by us. We are asking you to show up for us this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Matthew Daniels, then Carrie Richmond, and then Erin Finney. Matthew, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. My name is Matthew Daniels. I'm a Ward 5 resident at 10 Minor Street and the parent of a current Winter Hill pre-K student as well as a 2-year-old future Winter Hill student. For the next school year, we put Winter Hill as our first choice for kindergarten. Part of this decision was on the commitment of the school to keep together whole, even if at the Edgerly. However, on Friday, March 8th, we received a confusing and unsigned email saying that there were challenges in renovating the Edgerly. I understand that the specifics of these changes may be outside the scope of this committee, but they seem very sudden. In the email, the commitment to keep the Winter Hill community together was reasserted, though it was made clear that parents would have an opportunity to change their first choice school for the lottery. Conversations with various sources seem to confirm that the Capilano did not have space to host the Winter Hill students, and that people had been assured the community would not be split, despite the apparent challenges. Imagine our surprise when the next Monday morning we received a call saying that the Winter Hill Pre-K and K would be at Capilano next year, despite all of this. We were asked if we would like to change our first choice and that we had until 4 p.m. that day to decide. To be blunt, this was a stressful experience and made us question whether the district really wanted us at Winter Hill or not. Would there be space? Are we being asked to leave? What is best for our child? In the end, we decided to stick with Winter Hill, but now I worry that this type of communication will become the norm for our experience there. We're also hopeful that a solution can be found to keep all of Winter Hill under one roof. In this vein, I want to stress that while the Capilano is an excellent school with high-quality facilities, the Winter Hill students do not have equitable access to these facilities. The pre-K class does not have easy access to an age-appropriate bathroom, so the teachers are required to bring 18 children up and down a flight of stairs 3 times a day, which no doubt reduces instructional time. It is my understanding that they do not have regular access to the Capilano library, and the Winter Hill librarian must bring materials to and from the Edgerly as needed. This makes the 2 youngest grades have effectively limited access to both the Capilano and the Winter Hill community. Finally, school assignments were this morning. Based on what I've heard, this seems to be an over 50% decrease of people picking Winter Hill as their first choice. And we want to highlight that as a concern that a once vibrant learning community has dwindled so much in such a short period of time. Why is it that people were told different things about the location of Winter Hill pre-K and K classes? Who's responsible for this communication? Are we truly doing everything we can to reunite the Winter Hill community under one roof? And how do we make students, if they have to be at Capilano, receive equitable treatment? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Carrie Richmond and then Erin Finney. Carrie, you're welcome to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, my name is Carrie Richmond. I am an educator at the Winter Hill Community Innovation School, and I am also a resident of Somerville. I'm speaking here again to advocate for a community that has repeatedly been let down. We were promised that next academic year the entire community would be whole again by renovating the boxing club. But each and every single time we are told to trust the city and trust the process harms Winter Hill educators, students, and families, and we are left trying to put the pieces together and guess what has happened. I am reminding the school committee that they have power in their public platform to hold the city and the mayor to task and to uphold these promises for once, to keep us together without the removal of any programs. I'm asking you to stand up for the community that you say you care so much about. Additionally, it's really important that the city upholds their promise to the capital improvements scheduled to be completed this summer. I was at Winter Hill last summer when the renovations were really difficult for the students and we had to stop classes, and we are now having to add extra time to our classes this summer to make up for that. We still don't know where that's going to be. The AIM teachers have moved their classes more than anyone else. We have a lot of specialized equipment. We would like to know what was going to be happening with that. The middle school dance was last Friday, and I was really proud of how much joy my students found, like in the simplest things like community and self-expression. But I was also just reminded of how much more they deserve as we used toilet paper for streamers, and as I stepped outside in the hallway to have multiple rodents scurry across my feet as I went to the bathroom. This is a constant problem in my classroom, but it's one that we seem to be able to laugh at most days. I'm proud of our community for the way we've held each other during this time, but I'm ashamed at the way the city has overlooked our concerns, silenced us under the guise of community engagement, and repeatedly advanced their own interests quietly at the expense of our children's futures. We must stand together to ensure that our children will not continue to be forgotten and that they will have full access to appropriate and safe learning spaces. For years, our educators have been showing up for the Winter Hill community, needing to demand the district and city to do right by us. We are tired, but again, we are here, and we're asking you to make sure that you are showing up with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Erin Finney.
How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yep.
How you doing? My name is Erin Finney. I'm a lifelong Somerville resident. I'm a parent to a rising second grader and also a rising kindergartner at Winter Hill. You guys have heard the debacle that us parents have gone through. Can we remember that we're in this position because of the city's neglect, not maintaining our buildings? It's not the parents or the educators who have put us in this position. So could you guys please stop giving us the short end of the stick? I gotta say, I'm calling today because I'm angry and I'm really sad. We found out our classroom assignments for next year. 1/3, if not more, of my son's pre-K classroom is not returning to Winter Hill. I wonder why. Because we can't trust anybody in our city to do what's right by us, our educators, and our children. The city of Somerville has a legal obligation to educate our children. Is the bare minimum enough? Absolutely not. I call on the school committee to please make the mayor step up and make some tough choices. She might be worried about losing votes. I don't care. I care about my son and my daughter getting a quality education in the Somerville Public Schools before they hit high school. The timeline that you have us on now, that's where it puts them. This building will be built when he's a freshman in high school. That's not acceptable. We're also dealing with the debacle of double drop-offs again. Fun. We've gotten no answers from the school committee, from the city, about busing. I think that needs to be a priority, and it does not need to come out of the school budget. It should come out of the city's budget, because again, we're only in this mess because they didn't do right from the get. The assessment down at the building, they're telling us it went down. It shows it went up $500,000. So how our budget's decreased, I don't know. I really think you guys need to go back and pinch numbers again. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment, which brings us to our first item, which is the report of the superintendent. Dr. Komodo?
Madam Chair?
Oh, yep.
Given the audience, may I suggest we take it out of order and start with the...
So that is actually the first item under the superintendent's report, is the Edgerly update.
Good morning. I'm sorry. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to thank all the community that is here, and also through the unfortunately, our televised option is not working right now. Oh, it's working? Oh, yep. Great, excellent. So I just wanted to thank everyone, whether you're here or back at home, for your advocacy, especially for the sense of commitment as well as equity for all our members of the community. So thank you for that. I do have, part of my report is about the building, but I also have the principals here who are leading the buildings, and I want them to be first in this conversation. So after we do the presentation of the school improvement, we will get into the Edgerly question, if I may. So, or are we?
I think I'd prefer to do the Edgerly update first, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. That's okie dokie. So, Winter Hill. I just wanted to give some context for some of the information that I heard. So last week, we shared a difficult update with the Winter Hill Community School about the changes to the plans to renovate the former boxing club space, which raises questions about the possibility to bring all pre-K and K classrooms from Capuano over to the Edgerly building. As you know, we have stood with families from day one to advocate for this reunification. Throughout this time, we have been assured that this could be achieved through the renovation of the boxing club in time for the 24-25 school year. However, when it came clear to me that renovations to the boxing club can no longer be completed, I provided the Winter Hill community with an update as soon as possible. Even though I understand that much of the information in any update of this matter would need to come directly from the city, I'm committed to being open and transparent regardless of whether we have good news, uncertain news, or difficult news. This afternoon, the city has shared a short memo that provides additional detail and clarification on the reason for this change, which is now in your packet. We will also share this information with the Winter Hill community this week. Even with the recent challenges, I will not give up on advocating to bring the Winter Hill community together under one roof. This is a top priority. The city is still planning renovations and upgrades that will happen over the summer, but many of the details are still being finalized while we push for some of these possible solutions. In general, it is my understanding that the scope of the work to be completed will include an additional renovation to allow pre-K or additional renovations to allow pre-K and K to be located at the Edgerly, electrical upgrades that will eventually allow for cooling in the cafeteria and the gymnasium, and some additional repairs to the external part of the building. So the memo that is in your packets is with you, and so I don't know if you want to discuss the essence of the memo that provides the specifics and some of the details about the reason for the changes in plan. So I'm open to.
Ms. Patone and then Mr. Green.
Thank you, through the chair. I just was curious, was it put in the public packet as well, the memo? Because I know we received it in our email. It's in the public packet, just so anybody who's home or whatever, that they can access the memo from the city.
Mr. Green?
Yes, thank you, through you. I think to the mayor, first of all, yes, I want to say thanks for the memo. It does clarify some things. I do wish we could have got it even as late as Friday, because I can't speak for other members, but I know I do a lot of my parent conversations on weekends, sometimes even crashing people's birthday parties to do it. And so there's stuff in there that would have been really helpful when I was talking to the Hill parents this weekend, and just that I didn't know. And so I thank you for the progress on transparency. But even with that progress, I think it shows how far you have to go. And there will be some of the what went wrong conversations that I definitely want to have at some point. But given this memo and the commitment in writing that it's not a financial decision, I want to confirm, first thing off the bat, that the city is promising in writing and word and deed that whatever it costs to make the Winter Hill whole next year, the city will pay. Is that a correct reading of this memo?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. So if I may, I will say that we wanted a very comprehensive memo to go out. I would say the superintendent felt an urgency to say something. So in the meantime, there's a lot of missing information, which also slowed us down in getting it out. So this was the time, and there were a number of people sick also, that we were able to get it out in the memo. To answer directly, the cost, if it exceeds, so a number of things. The economic climate has happened, and the valuation of real estate, office buildings, has gone down. Our valuation of school buildings is similar to office buildings. The economic climate is bringing the value of the buildings down. The renovation can be done up to 30%. So if a building is valued at 20 million, 30% is higher than, I'm not saying this is the value of these buildings, but if it's valued at 10%, 30% is a lower number. As the memo described, in order to do some of the updates that was required in a particular way would mean that you would have to vacate the building. So I am not it is not possible to vacate the building because we have no other buildings to put our students in. And what I would hope is that you would allow the process to finish out and allow the time for staff members to meet to be able to work through and come up with some options. And they're in the middle of doing that now. I know it's really frustrating that people don't have the exact answers now, but we need people to finish doing their work. And the thing that threw this off is the market and the economic outlook.
Mr. Green?
Sure, I hear that, and like I said, I'm happy. First of all, I'm fully aware of the tension between thorough communication and fast communication. I appreciate that, and I am happy to do the debrief and the pluses and deltas at a later date. But I want to quote the memo. Quote, to be clear. Sure, it's page 3 under why is this a logistical issue, not a financial issue. To be clear, why this is a logistical issue and not a financial issue. Quote, to be clear, the city is committed to investing the funds required to bring the pre-K and K to Edgerly. While careful fiscal management is always necessary, funding is not the issue here. So, I just want to be clear, and I want it stated in this meeting where people can hear that we are willing to spend money, even if it's not on renovating Edgerly, but we'll figure out some solution, and that money will not be the barrier between us getting the pre-K and the K, we're here all under one roof. That's what I'm reading here. Am I misreading that? Or is that the city's commitment?
It says the original plans cannot proceed because they would result in work surpassing the renovation cost threshold.
Yes. And I get, although I have questions about that too, and I will come back to those questions later, but I understand that.
There's also going to be a joint meeting next week of the school committee, the city council and the school committee, where we will have more information and they can go through this in a deep dive. Because we're hoping the conversations that our capital projects director, Melissa Woods, and principal are having will move us forward in some direction. I am not the subject matter expert on all of this, and I don't know what kind of resolution it is. What I did say is, and I committed this last year, is that we would be fully transparent on this. We would share the information. We don't have all the shared, we don't have all the information to be able to share back.
Mr. Green and then Mr. Bito.
And while I am disappointed that there isn't a technical expert here, my question, I don't believe is a technical one, it's a question of political will. I'm asking you, as the CEO of the city, are you willing to commit to spending whatever it takes to find an alternate solution to this problem?
I am willing to put money into it it depends what the triggering threshold is, because it would mean that the entire school would have to move out. And the question is, where do they move to? Okay? And I am not looking to stop to hold money, but I'm looking to have, as much information as we can to be able to make decisions. And so I would just say, bear with us until we get a little bit more information.
Mr. Bitton?
Thank you. Dr. Phillips has had her hand up for longer than I, so I defer.
Okay. Dr. Phillips and then Mr. Bitton.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, I think this is going to the mayor. I 100% understand the bind that the city is in. I completely understand the changing value of real estate and the difficult financial moment that we're in. And I understand that we made a commitment to this community, and we said we were going to make them whole. And they have put up with more than any other community in this city for a really long time. And as far as I can tell, there's a whole lot of creative solutions out there that don't require us to go beyond that 30% cap. I taught in a portable for years. They are not that expensive. We're talking about 3 classrooms. The city has control over parking on the streets. There are many creative solutions. The question is, do we have the will? I think what the SEU has taught us in the past couple of years is there's always money for your priorities, and we have said that this school and making this community whole is our priority. So let's not break trust any further and go back on that. Let's say we will make this community whole, come hell or high water. It may not look like the way that we said we were going to do it at the beginning of the year, but it's a commitment we made, and we will follow through.
Mayor, did you want to respond?
Sure. So that's what we're trying to do. The creative ideas have not been finally vetted with our capital projects director and the principal, who have been working very closely on it. I don't have any more information. The goal has always been to unite the Winter Hill Community School. I don't know what the number is, but that has been the goal. That hasn't changed. We said that it would, I said that it would be transparent and we would engage the community, and that is a process that we have continued to live by internally. It's just taking a little bit longer to be able to share back exactly what that is going to be.
Mr. Bitton?
The goal is still the same.
Thank you. Mr. Bitton, and then back to Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Bitton, Ms. Barish, and then back to Mr. Green. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Through the chair, just first, thank you for this memorandum. I think there is a lot of helpful information here from what I was able to skim today, so I don't have a ton of response on the merits of what is in this document. I will say, and I know you're, Madam Mayor, I know you're not the subject matter expert, it would have been nice to have Director Raish and Director Woods here to be able to answer more in-depth questions that my colleagues, not myself, might have had. And I understand there's the meeting coming up.
That has been the designated place for where these happen, and so that's why we tried to put as much information together ahead for this meeting.
Fair, and that's appreciated.
Just quickly for the public, Monday evening will be the first joint City Council School Committee Buildings Subcommittee that has happened this calendar year, and that's happening Monday evening. Ms. Barish, and then Mr. Green.
Pardon, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Oh, I'll go back into queue. Thank you.
Ms. Barish.
Through you to Mayor Ballantyne, I understand if this isn't information that you have now, but it would be helpful if you could ask Director Raish or whomever. Dr. Phillips mentioned modular classrooms, and I just want to, it would be helpful to know, I assume that a modular classroom being put on the site would not impact that cap because it isn't a renovation or improvement to the building itself. So if you could find out if that is in fact the case in time for the Monday meeting, or if you could ask them to provide that information at that meeting, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Mr. Green, and then and then Ms. Patone. Mr. Green?
So the other, I think, question for legal on this is, what does it mean to quote unquote trigger ADA, right? If we, and again, I am using your memo as evidence here, but if we are committed to, as we should be, bringing it to full compliance at some point anyway, legally, if we have a plan with, it says we're gonna do some work this summer, next summer, et cetera, so on, is that to meet ADA compliance? Does that meet our legal requirement, even if the work happens with pauses in the work? And frankly, if the answer to that is no, what happens if we do it anyway?
I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
I think there's a 3 or a 5 year time between when you can make renovations. You come back around to it. And again, I am not 100% clear on the type of options. How all the spaces are being used now. Can some of the existing spaces be repurposed? Again, we need people to continue to do more work. I don't have the update information, and the goal was to try to give as much, if not more, clarity for next week's joint meeting of the council and the school committee.
To be clear, I didn't expect you to have the answer yet. I was asking you to ask your lawyers in the same way that I've asked our lawyers, and I've asked some experts in ADA law, because what I cannot believe is that the 33 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act, this has never come up before for some school, some district in this country. There must be a solution. I cannot believe the spirit of the law was never meant to be, if you can't do it perfect, don't do anything. And I recognize that it sounds like there may be some areas where our state law is too prescriptive and may need some change. But I think what we all are trying to say in our own ways is, we are confident that if we are willing to think outside the box, we can find a solution that keeps our commitment, keeps our values. And all we're asking for from you is a public commitment to also do that work. Like, I don't need you to have the answers today. I just need you to reassure the community we will find the answer.
Okay. Ms. Patone, and then Mr. Bitone, and then Dr. Ackman.
Thank you, through you, Chair Krepshin. I guess I have comments through you to the mayor, to the mayor's team. First of all, thank you for the memo. Super helpful to get more detail, and I completely understand the challenges and the push and pull between the superintendent wanting to be as transparent as possible, but not having all the information. Obviously, that's incredibly frustrating for the community, but transparency is a goal that I also ascribe to as well. So it's a push and pull, and it's very hard. I also appreciate my colleague, Mr. Green's comments about, the intention was not to, leave people in buildings that are not going to meet people's needs and to constrain us so much. I hope that at our meeting on Monday, which I'm glad now to understand that that's where the space is, because I wasn't maybe that's in the memo and I might have missed it because I didn't really get to read it in detail, but knowing that the Monday joint meeting is going to be a space where people are going to hear, and I hope everybody in the community understands that it's a city council meeting where the school committee, several members, and Mr. Bitone is the chair from the school committee side, and it's a virtual meeting. So I hope that people are able to attend. But there's two things that I think would be really helpful, and I don't know if you're going to be able to have all these. So one is sort of this consideration, is it a 3-year horizon, is it a 5-year horizon, can the project be over time? Can it be work that happens over summers? We don't necessarily have to sit down in 3 months and resolve all of our ADA issues or our code issues and build out the boxing club. I would imagine that you can do that over some period of time, and so that would be helpful to understand what the period of time is. And I know you're not going to have a full project plan. Completely understand that, but whether or not there's maybe a direction there that we can go. If our intention as the city is to upgrade this building, let's figure out how we can do it legally, but also, as Mr. Green said, what are the legal boundaries and how can we do this? Because the intention is clear that everybody wants to bring this building up and bring this community together. So that's one side, is how can we do this over time as opposed to try to solve the whole problem over the summer. The second thing I would like to hear about on Monday, if at all possible, is as much transparency regarding costs. So let's understand what the valuation of the building is. Let's understand what we've spent so far, and how much room is there to spend more, and some idea, we know it won't be the detail and necessarily completely accurate estimates, but what it might cost to both resolve, whether it's the boxing club or whatever project idea there is, as well as to continue the pathway on the compliance with the building. So those are two things, as much as we can do. I totally understand it's a week between now and then, so there's some limitations there, and I hope that the city is, bringing to bear all the resources they can through their outside support through consultants as well as the team. So I have another question, but I'll go back in the queue.
Thank you. Did you want to respond? Shall I go to our next member? Okay. Mr. Bitone?
Thank you, Chair Krepchen, through the chair, to the mayor. So in my day job, I work for the federal government, and we have an annual exercise where we evaluate risks to various programs. There's a federal statute that requires us to do that. What got me, obviously, other than the result of the fact that there's this, we can't renovate the boxing club space as immediately as we initially expected we would be able to, what really got me about this was that I didn't have any sense that this was a risk, that this butting up against the valuation threshold was not on my radar. And I imagine that was the case for many of my colleagues, members of our community. What would be extraordinarily helpful for me in thinking about items coming up in the future, and not necessarily today or on this issue, because we're in it and we're going to solve it, but is some exercise around risks in our building infrastructure and program infrastructure. What are the risks that we're confronted with? What are the severity of those risks and the likelihood of them happening? I don't know if the city prepares such a document in various offices or as a whole of government, but I would suggest that as an exercise, and I would love to see a report on that to the school committee to the extent that it affects us and our domain here. So that would be a request that I would ask.
So I would ask you if you could put that in writing and send it over to us, because some of the language you're using is a little bit different than we use on the city side. I understand the word risk. There are assessments to the buildings, the investment. So to that point, and just for the community, the investments that the city has put into the buildings have been schools. Okay, our clock tower fell in on top of this. That was a huge thing. If it just I think about a month after the Edgerly, that could have slid off the roof. All the investments and the money in the 30 years that I've lived in Somerville, the 22 years that I've been a parent in the Somerville public schools, the investments have been put into the schools and not our building. You can see the leaks just now on the ceilings above. There was one, you know, a year ago. There's two now, and a few of the other city buildings. We've had to consolidate and move people out of buildings. So there is an assessment of the building stock. That can certainly be shared, and also investments that we're trying to do for a lot of the mechanical systems to maintain the school buildings.
I had Dr. Ackman, Dr. Phillips, and then Ms. Patone.
Thank you. Through the chair, much like my colleague, I appreciate this memo. I appreciate the attempt at transparency. I will say personally, what I don't appreciate is what felt like blaming our superintendent for attempting transparency because this meeting was canceled with Winter Hill families. It was canceled without notice, and they were left in a vacuum. The superintendent, to the best of my understanding, was just attempting to provide the best information possible, as he stated, you know, for better or worse, an attempt at transparency. This is a beautiful memo. It's laid out very well, but I didn't know this was coming. Maybe I was in the dark. You know, if none of us know this is coming, it's not really transparency. And so I appreciate it, but transparency isn't just like the right words when it's convenient for the administration. It is making people feel heard and telling them when they're going to get this information. My understanding is that it's not a secondary building committee, but the advisory committee, like that they didn't know this was coming, this was just announced, you know, stuff like that, that it is wonderful that it's being attempted, but it's, you know, I'll speak from my perspective, I can't speak for these families, but it feels like it's a vacuum, and then, you know, something that isn't always clearly explained. So I appreciate the suggestions my colleagues have made. I would like to say to the Winter Hill families who are in the educators who have talked about mice and rats, welcome to East Somerville. Our community has been speaking to mayors for many years about how terrible the problem is, and the solutions have not gotten much better. I hope your advocacy, I hope you keep it up. Hopefully more voices bring solutions. The possibility of mobile classrooms, I would say where? East Somerville is probably the most dense of a very dense city, or close to it. I can't foresee, I think it's a wonderful idea objectively, subjectively, where that would go without taking away very valuable play space that is already in very limited supply at the Edgerly School. You know, but I would love to see it and hear it. And I really love Mr. Bitone's idea, talking about, I just wrote suggested, the risks. You know, I would love to hear feasible solutions, options, and then potential risks with all of them, because I know this stuff has to be done. Another thing I want to say is I understand the city has invested in school buildings before other municipal buildings. I see zero issue with that. I would like to mention that all of the ARPA funds could have gone into our municipal buildings. Your choices were your choices, I understand, but you know, there are other ways to spend funds. So I appreciate this, but I hope you understand that sometimes perfection is the enemy of the good, and this is a beautiful memo, but like, I will say what I'm looking for right now is more good and less perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if I could just comment that, I don't know what meeting you're talking about, the Edgerly. I was not apprised of a meeting with the Edgerly. I will say that there have been at least 4 meetings between the schools and the city jointly that crafted this memo, that has been working on and the information. So, pardon? I'm sorry. I rely on the superintendent to communicate that the city and the school, as a school committee member, that we are in the middle of crafting this. This has not been a surprise. These meetings have taken place, so I'm not really sure where that's coming from. What I just said is I'm not familiar with specifically a meeting with the Edgerly in terms of a community meeting, unless that was something that the superintendent was hosting. I'm familiar that there was a deadline that the superintendent was trying to meet for the enrollment, which was, what, maybe 2 Fridays ago? So the rest of, I'm not clear. We've been working on this memo together with parts of the information since February vacation.
Dr. Phillips, and then Ms. Patone.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, I want to follow up on a comment Mr. Green made, or a question Mr. Green asked that didn't get answered, and it's to you, Mayor. And Mr. Green, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm paraphrasing. The question was, can you commit now, can the mayor commit now and publicly to making the Winter Hill community whole by next year?
I don't have that is our goal. I don't have the information to be able to say that's possible. I know in the memo it will say that that city staff, capital project staff, and the principal are working on the building itself at the Edgerly to see what can be done within that space of classrooms that exist. We haven't finished that work. The goal is to do it. I'd love to be able to say, yes, we could make them whole, but I don't have all the information.
Dr. Phillips? And then
just to follow up through you, Chair, to the mayor, so the answer to that question is no?
No, that's not my answer. I don't have an answer now. And I'm not trying to, I'm being honest with the information, and nobody, or I'm not hearing that there's acknowledgement that we're in the process of getting all this information together, and that this is the #1 goal. Totally understand it. And my teams have been working nonstop on this.
I have Ms. Patone and then Mr. Green.
Through you, Chair Krupchen. So I had the opportunity to do some office hours this weekend, and they were heavily attended by Winter Hill families. There was a couple things that came up that I just wanted to bring up in the context of this, because they're related not to the new building, but to the Winter Hill at the Edgerly. One question was, which I think came up in public comment. First of all, also thanks to everybody who came out for public comment, very much appreciated. I agree that the busing should not come from the school district budget. So whatever 7, 8, 10% the school district gets from the city, I don't think that busing should be included as that line item, as that percentage. So I just want to make that statement. And we had this conversation, I think, last year during the budget process. So I hope that gets taken under consideration, because it's a reflection of the facility challenges that they have. Some people might think we're, nits and gnats, but that percent, 1% or whatever it is, really matters to the school district. The second thing is, there was questions about playground equipment and outdoor equipment. Obviously, making this whole community whole is the priority, but there's also questions about what can we do to the outside space. And specifically, we have this cap or limitation around compliance to code and ADA. Does the playground get included in that kind of work, and can that work be done separately under a separate line item? It might not be able to be, but I want to I guess, put that on the radar of the city and to see if that is true and whether or not that's something can be responded to on Monday. And I apologize, I'm going to ask, I guess I could take my other question offline unless Mr. Green after.
Okay, Mr. Green?
Thank you. I'm actually going to now build off of Dr. Phillips' question, which is that, I think there is whatever can be done within the confines of ADA, and I'm going to echo Ms. Tone here and say that we need the actual dollar amounts at Monday's meeting, right? It's like, in order to fully understand the decision, we need to understand what it cost. But that said, we also know, because we did it with the high school, there are other solutions when you take classrooms offline. And in fact, my guess would be that, like the high school, if we were to bring in modular buildings at the Edgerly, they would be the best classrooms in the building. They'd be, like it was with the high school, those modular buildings, those modular classrooms would be the best facilities in the school. So I think when we say that commitment, again, it's not a technical commitment. Like, we recognize that there are technical problems that need to be solved. What I think we're not hearing from the city is the political will that says, in times of crisis, what we want leaders to be able to say is, yeah, we know it's going to be tough, we know there are going to be setbacks, but we are going to do whatever it takes to make this work. And like, that's just a statement of will.
Dr. Cremona, do you want to speak?
Through the chair, I know that there are questions about modular options, and I don't want to speak for the city, but I do want to speak for the ongoing conversations that we have had with Principal Corney, as well as the city team. So on a weekly basis, we have meeting 2 or 3 times a week to discuss the alternatives. So, and again, I don't want to speak for the city on this, but I know that there is an alternative in which the idea of pre-K and K is feasible, but there requires to do some adjustments in the building. Also, I heard the issue of soundproofing. I know that's part of the conversation that is in the works, as well as the electric, as I mentioned earlier on. So those are things that have been already identified as things that will not trigger that threshold as it is right now. And then the question around playground is more related to also the space to create a safety structure for that. But I just wanted to, I know that Corney and I have been, the principal, Goslin and I have been in the same room talking about all the different scenarios. But I know that the AM team has been created a couple of options that seem viable within the cost constraints that have been shared with us. So I just wanted to add that extra layer of information.
I have what is hopefully a final question so that we can hear from our principals who have been patiently waiting, which is just, it would be helpful on Monday if there was some sort of timeline. I understand this is all being worked out, but given that it's mid-March and given that construction takes bids and hiring people and all of those things, what is our hard stop for whatever we are going to do this summer? What's the hard stop for knowing what that is?
Sure. The team is working on that. I would like, though, to talk about something that was brought up here. It was the 18 months and the advisory group. So back on December 19th, when we had the community meeting at the high school, this slide was put up about the MSBA process. And we are, it doesn't say what page it is, but it is certainly on the website to be able to look at it. We are in the eligibility process right now. And to get to the feasibility process, starting about now, is about 18 months. And that was shared back on December 19th. So I'm totally committed to a broad and inclusive engagement process that informs the important decisions around the next school building. and I remain committed to that process that engages all, and especially those who are not always heard and have not been heard. And I'm open to whatever outcomes best serves the community, our schools, and our families. The advisory group process and the associated community engagement will run parallel to the MSBA process and depend on several milestones that are governed by the MSBA process. So we opted in as a community to the MSBA process. Why? Because hypothetically speaking, if this new school costs $100 million and the city can get 50–60%, that's $50–60 million to the cost of the school. The advisory group's process and the associated community engagement will run parallel. And the idea is that it will deal with a lot of these big questions about one school, two schools, and not the technical piece that happens starting at the through the feasibility study. While the decision to combine or not combine the Brown and the Winter Hill populations into one building will not be made by the MSBA, it is important that the city makes that decision based on the same data that the MSBA will be using to fund the building. And that estimate, again, this is the MSBA process, is about 18 months from now. The advisory group, to complete its mission, is based upon corresponding points to the projected MSBA schedule. For example, the city and the SPS are currently working with the MSBA to define the educational program and student enrollment for both the combined and non-combined cases to scope out the feasibility study and to determine potential reimbursement rates. This is an important information for the advisory group to consider. Early next year, in collaboration with the MSBA, the city will hire an owner project manager and a designer architect. The technical team will be important assets to the community process. That technical team will develop concept plans and cost estimates that will be reviewed by the advisory group. Note that the new technical team must be selected by a new MSBA-approved selection process and will continue to work started during the K-8 capacity study by the consultants that we hired, Beyer, Blinder, and Bell. We can't simply amend Beyer, Blinder and Bell's contract to continue the work directly. Were we not faced with the unique opportunity and the challenge of potentially combining the school populations or not, the projected MSBA schedule would put the site selection milestone approximately 18 months from now. For us, the issue of site selection is closely tied to the decision to combine the populations or not. Therefore, if you consider when necessary data will be available for the advisory group and when we would need a decision from the group, that fits into and does not delay. This doesn't delay the MSBA process, which is 18 months is our estimate. As with all projects and public processes, that milestone is subject to change, but it is a reasonable estimate when considering all the information that the advisory group needs to consider to make the informed decision.
So with that, I'm going to ask that we hold off on questions about this till when later in the meeting when we have an MSBA update, because I want to get our principals up here, and I apologize for making them wait this long, because I know you guys have to be up early. Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair Cruption. Just a quick question. I do think that, to the superintendent, through you, letting the Winter Hill community know when and if there is going to be a replacement to that meeting that was originally scheduled and cancels, I think would really help for the community. You may decide that the stuff that the city is doing is going to, have that first, or there won't be one necessary to have one, but I do think giving that feedback sooner rather than later would be helpful.
Okay, with that, Dr. Carmona.
Great. So again, thank you everyone for your patience, and also thank you for your advocacy. That makes a strong community. We're going to shift a little bit. We have our principals here who are presenting their school improvement plans. So I'm going to have Sam Elligin, who is our director of data, introduce the different principals, or not? Sam, you're looking at me like, okay, so that might not be it. So I'm going to introduce the different principals we have. We have Principal Marshall from the Kennedy, and we also have Principal Kirsten from the high school. So I'm going to have Mr. Marshall come up to the podium and share his school improvement plan.
Wow. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are very excited to present the Kennedy School. So you can go to the next slide. Just a little bit about the Kennedy School. We are the Kennedy Tigers. We're very proud of that. Tigers stand for teamwork, integrity, growth mindset, empathy, and respect. And so that's something we instill into our school every day with our students. It's something we talk about with our students when we have challenges, and it's stuff that we reinforce throughout the day. You can go to the next slide. Impact, innovation, and relationships has been something that we've talked about for many years. We still hold true to that. We still think it's important. But we know that everything we do, as it says up here, has impact. Innovation is key to learning and growing. And then relationships obviously foster the environment to do that learning and growing, and it's something that we take very seriously. Sam joined me last year as the assistant principal. I have Janet O'Reilly as the special ed department head. So our focus areas on academics. You can see our MCAS results for 2023. You can see that still an area of need for us is low income and students with disabilities. So it's something we're still continuing to work on. Janet joined us this year as the department head. It's something our specialized programs, some of those students take the regular MCAS, some of our students take the MCAS Alt, which is an alternative way of presenting MCAS information. So we really want to help our students who struggle in this area to work on stamina and confidence. So those are two areas that we focus on, and we're going to focus on continuously with our SEEK program and our Life Skills program. Both those programs are in our building. They are district-wide programs, but they are special to the Kennedy. We are very proud of having them at the Kennedy. I worked at the SEEK program for many, many years. I still have a true heart for that. And so it's really important that we help those students master those skills. That the MCAS is, yes, it's just a specific result, but it's a lifelong thing about learning. It's about, helping students feel confident in the work that they're doing. Next slide. Sam.
Never mind, I'm not going to touch that. So I'm here to talk about MTSS. So when we're looking at our MCAS data or any academic data, and we're looking at different demographics and how students are performing, one system that we're looking at is our multi-tiered systems and supports. So we're looking at tiers of that. Tier 1 instruction, how are all students getting access to the curriculum and what does that look like? And then we also run a team that is a team of educators who support teachers with students who may be struggling with core instruction or Tier 1 instruction, and how we can provide them Tier 2 instruction. We've had 21 students this year. We've presented 4 school-based special education referrals, and while it's not just about special education referrals, it's like a valuable team process in order to highlight what data, what interventions are going to be research-based, what interventions are going to provide students the support that they need, and by bringing a team together of experts in that. Things that we're working on with that is bringing relevant data to the table. What does that look like? How are we as a team, as administration, providing supports, training, and resources for teachers in implementing any kind of interventions? What are those interventions looking like? who's being referred, how are we supporting those students? So we look a lot at like demographics to see, is there an overrepresentation of students coming in for MTSS? So looking at all those systems is something that we've been really kind of working on last year and this year. It still needs work, and we're hoping to continue with the support of the district as well.
And the district is trying to streamline the MTSS process so that as all schools, we're as similar as possible. We know that our schools are not all the same, but the processes should be as similar as we can make them. We can go to, enlarge this. My eyes are not as good as they used to be. So just like showing our action steps in terms of, making those meetings meaningful for teachers, but also helping them make meaningful goals for our students. So that's a big piece of MTSS. You can go to the next slide. Going to keep this to 10 minutes. I'm going to be good about it. You can go to the next slide after that. So in terms of equity, we're looking at obviously our conduct, our students, because we have specialized programs, often our numbers will be skewed in terms of students on IEPs who are getting suspended, and we're working towards alternatives to suspension. One of those things is restorative justice. That's a big push for the district, obviously, but it's also a big push for our school. We've had a lot of teachers trained on restorative justice this year in the first tier, the second tier, and we're working on getting people in the third tier of restorative justice, but it's also a mindset for how we are working with our students in terms of giving back to the community. When something's gone wrong and we've needed to we've needed to support our students, we want to know how they can give back to the community. So that's a big piece of the equity. That's also social emotional. If you go to the next slide. Keep going. If you notice that our attendance, we consistently are around 95%. We want to keep that. We want it to obviously be more. We want all students attending school, all students in terms of tardiness and attendance. And we work with students on the reasons behind them not coming to school. If it's school avoidance, if it's school, if they're just late because maybe they have a sibling that goes to a different school. And so we're working with students on those things. We come up with student contracts, attendance contracts with our redirect. We are this one school that still has redirects. I think other schools have deans. I'm always pushing for a second redirect. I know that's a push. But I just really want to ban our students, put them in bands so that one redirect teacher works with the lower grades, one works with the upper grades. If you go to the next slide, it shows the counselor. We were lucky to have a general ed adjustment counselor position filled at our school, and she has just done an amazing job at really targeting the needs of our middle school kids. A couple years ago it was vaping, cell phone use, social media. Last year, Sam and I put into place a cell phone policy to turn in cell phones every day. It's very successful in terms of the amount of cell phone issues we have not had. So that's been a big piece, and I think having a counselor to support students in different ways has really been helpful in just understanding the needs of that middle school population. If you go to the next page, continued focus on the second step for the district as they do second step 2.0. Just definitely working with our teachers to be more comfortable with that. It's still in its early stages, so next year everybody will be trained in it. And then our final thoughts, if you want to go to the final thoughts page, just really celebrating the fact that we are a blue ribbon school. I was able to go with Dr. Carmona to Washington, D.C., and at first it was kind of it's one of those things where, you do the paperwork and they fill you in, but honestly, it was really great to be around other principals and assistant principals and just educators and really learning what it means throughout the country, how different and yet how we are the same. There's so many differences, but there's so many of the same issues that come up. We stand with the Winter Hill, obviously. You know, we celebrate the district. We want our schools to be the best schools that we can be. And so thank you to everybody tonight. I really appreciate everyone coming out. If you have any questions, we can answer them.
Great, thank you so much. Do I have questions from my colleagues? Ms. Parrish? And then Dr. Ackman?
Is this an alumni question? Because
Thank you. No. I noticed in the MTSS referral slide, it looks like there were no referrals for 5th, 6th, and 7th grades. And I wondered, like, if you've thought about why that is, or if you have thoughts about why that is. And I'd love to hear it, because I'm sure other schools could benefit, and I'm sure that other grades could benefit.
I think when we're looking at it, we're hoping that teachers are understanding their students from an earlier age so that we can put interventions as soon as possible, right? So if a student is struggling with phonemic awareness or phonics, we'd hopefully catch that before they get to grades like 4, 5, 6. So that's kind of the goal, right? Like, what interventions can we put in as early as possible in terms of tier 2 and making sure tier 1 is really solid so that all students are getting that education. And then if students need a little bit more, are we doing that with Fidelity? Are we putting those in place? And then we go from there. So.
Dr. Ackman?
Thank you, through the chair. This may be to Ms. Elligine. Thank you for this great presentation. Also, thank you for your large font, because often people cram it in and it is hard to see as we age. I'm curious about sort of the subgroup data. I always appreciate, first off, when administrators talk about areas of growth and that, like, there are discrepancies and you're working on it. I would love to know what this is compared to, like, our district average, and if we have any sense of that.
No, sorry. Was the question about MTSS referral data?
Specifically, it was their 6 slide, I don't know, their MCAS results bar graph slide. There it is. So they're talking about the discrepancies between subgroups, and they're pretty substantial discrepancies. And I'm curious, like, how that is compared to the rest of the district.
Through the chair, yeah, I would say that these gaps between subgroups are persistent throughout the entire district. Like, whether you look at it district-wide, whether you look at it by school, you see these gaps between the different subgroups. It's something that we've looked at very frequently at the district level and also at the school level. It's also something that's existed pre-COVID, post-COVID now, and it's something that we definitely want to focus on addressing.
Can I ask a follow-up?
I think Dr. Hirano wanted to refer.
Through the chair.
Can you do a follow-up?
Yeah, unfortunately, right now, our socioeconomics and demographics are determining outcomes. And so that's a sad thing to say, and is the reality, and I want to make sure that on average, is that right? And that is one of the challenges as a district, that question around making sure that our NTSS model is robust across every school is what we're trying to do. So our outcomes should not be already predetermined by certain indicators. So it is something that we have seen for many years, and it is time to disrupt that trajectory. So.
Dr. Ackman, should follow up?
Yes, through the chair, I couldn't agree more. I guess and again, thank you for presenting this. I'm not sure I've seen it from the presentation so far. It's like 40 to 50% percentage points discrepancy. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say really quickly is the fact that we do have specialized programs in our building. I think that is a testament to some of that, but again, some of that work lies in building confidence and building stamina. And so that's really a piece that we're working on.
Thank you. Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair Krepchen. Thank you for this presentation. I have a couple questions, and I can do them all or just one at a time if there's other people.
Just do them all for now.
Okay.
Go for it.
They were about, in the equity area, in the conduct demographics, sort of we have a higher level of conduct for our Black students, even though they're a very small percentage of our population in the school. And I'm kind of getting my head around, what the action steps are around that. I mean, making it an aware issue is obviously a huge action step, like making this public information, sharing it with the staff. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
So it still goes back to some of our specialized programs.
Okay.
And the demographics that way, but one of the things that we're actually working on, and we're required to work on, which is actually a great thing, is we're looking to have alternatives to suspension. So when we have conversations about, like, okay, so what do we do with the student who was aggressive? What do we do with the student who, we really want to think through how can they. So yes, there's the numbers that show an emergency removal or a suspension, but it's like, what else can we do too? So what is it that we're going to do to demonstrate to the student, to the community, that you matter, and this is something that's we need to work on. And so it's always that question of how do we, as we're working through restorative justice, what is that going to look like in every classroom? Not everybody's there yet, so that's just part of where we're going, but we want that to be a conversation. Honestly, and Sam and I both, and Janet too, we've had these conversations. It's like, what does a student feel like is important for them? They might have violated a part of part of the community, but what do they need? So that's how my brain thinks. That's how we sit there and we talk about those conversations.
Yeah.
Sam's good. Janet's going to say something. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think something that we've done this year is to add training for our staff in specialized program around verbal de-escalation and around having conversation with kids, sort of being proactive when you see a kid beginning to become dysregulated. How do we work with staff to have those skill sets so that we are proactive instead of letting kids get so dysregulated? So that's been real active work. We've had our whole SEEK staff CPI trained. We have after-school training. We have 10 sessions that Ildefonso has put in place for our SEEK staff as well, really to work on that skill set of our staff. And I think that's where we're going to see a difference as we get a highly trained staff working with our students who we know are at risk.
All right, thank you. Mr. Butone,
come back to me.
Dr. Ackman, and then we'll come back to you. Mr. Butone?
Thank you, Chair Krupchen, through the chair. I want to follow up on Ms. Pitone's question around conduct. If you could go to slide 11, because I agree with everything you said, and also I commend the presentation, really distilled, which I really appreciated. But the numbers here seem dissonant with sort of what you were talking about, with wanting to find, non-suspension consequences for students' conduct. If you look at school year 20, well, both. The trend here is very few losses of privileges, more emphasis on mostly out-of-school suspension, a little bit in-school suspension, and then emergency removal. And so it seems like, I imagine what I'm seeing here is there's a whole picture that's not in the table.
Sure.
Around how to deal with behavior. So
I can tell you that, let's see, I've been an administrator for over 10 years. We started at 70 suspensions. When I started. And one of the things that we worked at was, what does that mean to suspend a student? What does that mean to take them out of school? So when I look at those numbers, I go, that's pretty great. And emergency removals are ways to investigate. They're also a safety mechanism. So they count as suspensions from a district standpoint, from a state standpoint, but we look at them as a way, and yes, they're removing kids from school. So that's not ideal. That is not what I want. But the way I look at it is, I have to really investigate what happened, And if it's, and there's a few things, like if it's a physical aggression towards a staff person, or if it's a physical aggression towards another student, we do take those seriously, and they have varying impacts. Like if it's, kind of low level, it's like, no. But if it's a serious aggression, we want people to feel safe in school. And so those things aren't taken lightly, those things are not done lightly, but every time we're looking for that mechanism to say, you're a part of this community. Like, you must have had something going on for you that made this situation occur. What is it? How do I help you? But I also have to demonstrate to other people it's a safe place to be. So that's how I don't know.
And for every one of those, we recognize that is a student, perhaps in a lot of cases, that's struggling. We have student support teams, we meet with IEP teams if it's a student on an IEP, and we put interventions in place. This only gives you the numbers to the state. We're doing behavior plans, we're putting more support staff, we're giving scheduled breaks for students. We're putting a lot of time and investment, a lot of the times Tier 3 behavioral interventions and supports to ensure, because I can tell you how many times we've sat with educators, with staff, and we want the student to be successful, and we're trying different things and tracking that data, immense amounts of data that we're tracking. And unfortunately, that doesn't capture everything here, but I do want to recognize how hard our support staff work above and beyond to make sure that students feel safe at school and supported.
And it goes back to the relationship piece. Like, we know our kids. We know those students who struggle. And we know the students who don't struggle, but we know those students who struggle. And anybody who comes into our building, they're going to know those kids too, because we know their names, we know where they're from, we know their stories, we know what makes them tick, we know what gets them excited about school, we know what's a struggle for school. That's the important piece to me, and I know for the rest of us. That's where we put our energy into. I asked for another redirect because I wanted time to do, commit myself to, being an educational leader, and but the kids are the reason, and the students are the reason why we do the work we do. Sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true.
Did you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, and thank you. I think the story you tell there is really important, and the numbers behind these numbers that you're sort of talking about, how many 70, let's say, counseling sessions or whatever it is that are replacing the suspensions would help tell that story and help support our budgetary decisions to support positions like the one you're describing. So anyway, for future reference, and thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ackman and then Ms. Patone.
Thank you. I feel like all my questions are not actually directed at you, so I apologize for that. One of the things that seeing your presentation has made me think of is sort of the income disparities of the student populations of our district. And it's a request that I've made, I know, in writing to the chair and the superintendent, and it's one that I'm going to make publicly, and it's probably to the mayor, or through the chair to the mayor, to have a member of your staff present census data to us, and specifically in regard to our student populations, because one of the things I would love to know is sort of the breakdown of these disabilities, these removals by family income and things like that. And, I know that we have some census data, rough in areas like that. And, I would love to know, I think we all have our preconceived notions of the income of families in certain schools, and we know who is free and reduced lunch and who isn't, but I would love a clearer picture on that, because I think that would also help us understand, more strategic ways to serve those populations. So.
Well, in true fairness, the superintendent and I have had conversations about, the demographics of our building. I mean, they've changed. This is my 25th year at the same building. They've changed over the years, and I have always said to Dr. Carmona that, I relish that diversity, and I would love for the district to figure that out. I think we as an admin team feel the same way. I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like we've always enjoyed when it was much more diverse. But we still, part of our makeup is those specialized programs. Part of the makeup is the fact that we have district-wide programs coming into our building, and we get to celebrate that, and that's pretty diverse.
But I think to your point, Dr. Ackman, our specialized programs are, obviously, they're all students with IEPs, but they are, in comparison to the rest of the school, their demographics are very different than the rest of our school, both income and race and ethnicity. So to what you're asking, there is, and there's a lot of conversations for us, too, about what a majority white school is viewing specialized programs that don't look like them, that don't have the same experience as them, and how that adds to, or could add, right, for the majority population on what they seeing a student on an IEP is, what that looks like, right? So there's a lot of these conversations for us as an impact in our whole community about what that looks like, and for our specialized programs, how do they feel integrated into a community? And that's a lot on our mind, a lot.
Thank you. Ms. Patone? Is your microphone on, Laura?
Nope. So how are we capturing income? We used to do it through the free and reduced lunch form. Now that we're all free lunch, that we don't capture that anymore, and we don't capture it on enrollment. And I think my question has to do with, like, how are we doing this in a consistent way? Because now I'm seeing data that has income in it, but then other places we don't have income data. And you don't have to answer this now, but I really would like to know how we are capturing it, and ideally in a consistent manner.
Okay.
Hello, through the chair. So yeah, the way that we do capture income has changed a lot, especially over the last 5-ish years. So like you said before, we used to use free or reduced lunch. That was something that would go home at the beginning of the year that families would fill out. But because we're moving more towards free lunch programs for like entire district, we're getting fewer responses back from families on those types of forms. So the main way that we use it, or that we track income status, is by using the state's economically disadvantaged variable, and it basically is telling us whether a student and their family is participating in state-run programs like Mass Health or SNAP or different benefits like that. And so we get that from the state about 3 times per year when we submit enrollment numbers through SIMS reporting. So that's the designator that we usually use now versus, yep, and we have that designation for all the students that are enrolled during those 3 reporting periods.
Do you find that that gives us numbers that are higher than they used to be or lower than they used to be versus the self-reporting on free and reduced lunch?
I would say lower than what they used to be, because now the threshold's a little bit more challenging. So instead of it being based on income, now it's more based off of participation in certain programs.
All right, and it doesn't capture any of our undocumented families because they're not participating in those programs? Okay, so the undocumented families are not captured, as opposed to they were captured possibly in the free and reduced lunch. So this is tricky. Okay, thank you. But at least I'm glad to hear that it's all consistent, so.
Have the mayor and then Dr. Phillips.
Thank you. As a follow-up, so what's the change? When you say it's lower, what is the change? Thank you.
Yep, I don't have the exact percentage off of the top of my head, but I do know it's decreased compared to what we would collect from the free or reduced lunch applications from families. But again, we weren't always consistently getting every single one of those back, and that number has kind of decreased quite a bit over the years of who's actually filling out the application. So now we really do just mainly focus on the economically disadvantaged variable. That variable has been around for about 3 years. I believe they changed that around, like around slightly before the pandemic, I believe. So that's what we've been using.
Can I then, as a second, does that change the grant opportunities since it's lower that the city has applied for, or whatever else is tied into, whether it's state or federal opportunities?
That's a great question. I'm not too familiar with how that impacts the grant process, but we can definitely find out and follow up on that.
And
thank you.
I was just going to say, we'll have to consult with our CFO, but I believe we were losing Title I funding next year because of that, if I'm correct.
It's the congruence of a couple of things, but I mean, I've been in urban districts in which when we switched to actually not using free and reduced, there was a 20 to 30% decrease on funding. I think the way also the state is calculating actually the money that is generated for Title I has been lower for districts like ours because we get all our funding from the city pretty much, and so that has had an impact on the revenues, certain bucket of revenue that we get, but it impacts communities like Somerville. But the other piece of that is that we have a large population that probably doesn't live in any records because of their undocumented, as you mentioned, so that probably has a larger impact in our buildings.
Is there, I mean, if there's a huge funding decrease, like you're talking, you know, it could make a difference of 20+%. Is there anything that the city, I mean, that the schools can do in terms of, I don't know, setting up its own way of calculating? I mean, I don't know what the laws are to that, but is there any other alternative way to capture that information?
Through the chair. So I was referring to how it impacted us in Lowell when that happened. I don't know the numbers right now, but I always know that when one place where that shows up is in terms of the needs of every building. So if you look at some demographics in some buildings, I know we had here, the East principal was asking for more resources because there were more socio-emotional needs. So often, if you look at a distribution of fundings the non-staffing building, the little budget that we have gets distributed to every building somewhat equally based on a weighted cost per student, but there are some schools that have a larger need because the weight doesn't account for some other variables that we need to include. So that is a conversation that we have had with our CFO as to how can we represent that distribution of funds that are non-staffing funds to reflect some of those bigger demographic needs.
I think the mayor's asking a slightly different question, which is how we report our demographics to the federal government to get our Title I funding, and is there ways to do that? And I think Dr. Ackman or Dr. Phillips might have an answer. Dr. Ackman?
Through the chair, and I'm going to look to Dr. Phillips to back me up on that. Just, as an education policy researcher, I've spent a lot of time studying this. There have been a bunch of recent, let's say within the past decade or maybe longer at this point, Supreme Court cases that have further restricted our ability to collect these data. So the short answer to your question is it is really hard and a lot of it's illegal. What would be of value? I look to the experts to my right, I'm gonna say, to tell me if I'm wrong, but you would be surprised what is illegal to try and obtain that would be of value in looking for grants and things like that.
Dr. Phillips, do you also want to respond?
Yeah, I wanted to say three things. The first is that free and reduced lunch is a bad measure of low-income status, and it's not particularly predictive. Economic disadvantage, which the state has moved to, is much more predictive of outcomes for kids, so that's a good thing. The second thing is that everybody in the country is moving towards measures like this, both because of how bad free and reduced price lunch is as a measure, and because everybody's moving to universal eligibility. The third thing I wanted to say is that because of the Student Opportunity Act, DESE changed its low-income measure, right? We went from low-income to ECODIS, now we're back to low-income. There is this supplemental documentation that we could be doing to document kids who are below 185% of the poverty level, I think. I don't know if we're doing it. It looks like a pain to collect, but just wanted to flag that as an option. Oh, sorry, and the fourth thing I wanted to say is to Ms. Patone's point about the undocumented students who were not captured in EcoDis, DESE has a high needs measure that maybe we could look at more when we're disaggregating our data. We look at it a lot, but that captures kids in ELL, formerly ELL, and a number of other.
Yeah, it's sort of a weird way of doing high needs, though. It's like it's a mixed, like high needs means a lot of things, so.
Okay, thank you for that. I think Dr. Ackman had another question? No. Dr. Phillips, was there, thank you. Ms. Parrish.
Thank you, Chair Corruption. I have a couple of questions that are not necessarily for the Kennedy School team, but the presentation brought them up for me, so I just wanted to ask them. The first one maybe more so than the second, but the adjustment counselor, the gen ed adjustment counselor, it was my understanding that typically the adjustment counselors work with students on IEPs throughout the district. Is it a unique position at the Kennedy School, or have I misunderstood the role?
You haven't misunderstood the role. It's typically been designated towards special education, but it does exist. Like, you can be an adjustment counselor, you can see students on, like, you can see them individually, it's sort of like a case, you can have a caseload, but you don't fall under the special education budget. This general education counselor, which is amazing, does not fall under the special education budget.
So, can I follow up? So, to the district, is this a unique position at the Kennedy, or are there gen ed adjustment counselors in our other schools as well?
Through the chair, I know that as Steve said, some of the adjustment counselors designations are through IEPs, but I know that we made a significant investment through ESSER, and I will have to look at the breakdown of who is and who isn't.
And I'm getting noddings from...
I know, I see back there.
We have both regular ed and special education adjustment counselors at the high school. They're separate positions, and they serve different populations.
Thank you.
And Corny is actually agreeing with that. So that is very fortunate. Usually, you know, having an adjustment counselor to do regular instruction is a significant help. So I think that was part of the ESSER additions, I believe.
Great. I have Ms. Patone, and then hopefully we can wrap this up. Okay, Ms. Patone and then Ms. Parrish.
Thank you, through you, Chair Corruption, with my mic on. I just had a quick question about second step. And I know that we're revamping and hopefully doing more training, but what I'm seeing here is that the adjustment counselor is doing the training. And my understanding is that have your regular teachers are generally doing the training because that's more beneficial for the community. So I just wanted, maybe I misread this, or...
No, you didn't.
So right now we're in the
training
like we're doing pilots this year, and so our counselor is piloting for the 7th and 8th grade to see kind of like what that model would look like. The whole entire staff haven't been trained in second step yet, but like I did the training, and some other teachers, like those early adopters, kind of really wanted to go forth and like see how it would work. And our counselors, the middle school adjustment counselor, has been really helpful in like us collaborating and talking about like how do we support middle school, what is the second step going to look like for middle school, what's the structure. So for this year, she has been doing it. And we've been co-leading circles with early adopters as well, to kind of co-facilitate with teachers to like build up that skill set together and then go forward.
So the intention is eventually that it goes through the regular ed teachers?
It will be, yes.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Parrish.
Thank you, and I think this is probably more of a question for the superintendent, but we'll see. In thinking about restorative justice, which a lot of our schools have talked about, expanding training in restorative justice, I'm wondering how we're communicating with families around restorative justice, because I imagine that discipline in schools looks really different now than it did when I was in school. So I'm just wondering if, and it's entirely possible that this communication is happening and I've just missed it, but I'm just wondering if we are sort of teaching families about what discipline looks like now.
So one of my slides, or one of the things on my slides that I didn't read, was the fact that our goal is to get families in line with what we're doing. It is something that we as a school want to have kind of that home balance, like the homeschool balance. Like, what is it that works with your student? What is it that we do that you might want to do? The conversations take place. I do send out communications to families in regards to some of the things. For example, this is just a kind of end of the year example for 8th graders, but like they go on these fun field trips like Canopy Lake and all these things. And I say like, okay, so there's certain things that we don't want kids to do, you know, like we want them to be in the right place at the right time. We want them to not use, you know, inappropriate anything. But what we also talked about this year, and something I'm bringing up and will write out to the families, is the fact that, like, if your student comes to one of us, Sam or myself, and says, hey, you know what, I had this infraction, I'd really like to give back to the community. It's not going to sound like that, it might not look like that, but the idea is that they have the ability to come to one of us or to their teacher and say, I know I screwed up, I made a mistake. I want to give back to the community in this way, and we have that conversation. They earn their fraction back, or whatever. They earn their fraction back. I guess that's not really a word. But the idea is that they can restore that part of the community. And so I think that's an important piece, and that's where I communicate that to families. It is, from a general district standpoint, I don't know, but it is an important piece of our school, and like Sam had said earlier, a lot of people are being trained in it. We're really working towards people using it. Sam actually does a lot of circles in the morning with kids. So I agree. I think that's a piece we could actually start to communicate more on what that looks like. Because not everybody's comfortable with it, not everybody understands it, and I think the more we can do that, the better.
And I also think clarity around, like, right now when we're when all teachers are being trained, it's tier 1 circles, right? So it's like community-based circles right now. And we're also getting like harm reduction circles, training and things like that, but that's like a higher level. So right now it's really just building teacher capacity and training around like building a sense of community, building a circle, building those routines right now, so that we can get to more of like the consistent restorative practices going forward in tier 2 and tier 3 settings. Yeah.
Through the chair, if I may. So, good question. So, in the implementation or the pilot phase or implementation phase of this work, one of the things that has happened is that it has been a kind of a gradual rollout, and part of that piece that is still evolving is a website for families to provide more communication. There's also Liz, the director of special education, Liz Doncaster, has part of her budget an SEL person, like is like similar to other systems that we have like an advocate in the building or an implementer in the building that does the SEL work. I guess part of that was to have that individual also communicate, create a larger outreach with families. But that is one thing that is, I discussed with Liz to make sure that we build up the communication with families. It is new to some families. I think, how we raise our kids and how we expected them to behave is totally different, and how to ask them for them to kind of make repairs is different the way that restorative justice does it. So that is a gap. It is being worked on, and so we will probably at some point be able to share more information about that.
Great. Thank you. And I think with that, we can say thank you and good night to our Kennedy team. And welcome our high school team. Thank you for your patience.
Hello. We have a lot of slides on there, but I promise I'm just going to give you the highlights. You can look at the slides on your own. We'll keep it short. I did lose half my team, so you're going to get about a lot more of my voice than perhaps you wanted. But I'm here with Trish Murphy, our math department head, and we had 2 of our assistant principals here to talk more about the stuff we're doing with attendance, but I can fill in for them. So again, we're going to skip through some slides that you can peruse on your own. But just a reminder of our mission and vision that Somerville High School really prides itself on the comprehensive part of our schooling, both in terms of our programming, CTE, our supports for our MLE, but also just in terms of really trying to have students explore their passions and find a lot of different definitions of success and develop their skills that will help them in life, which we call our Highlander habits. Next slide, please. And you can learn more about those online too. Next slide, please. Our 3 basic goals for our school improvement plan these past 2 years are not disparate, they're really interrelated, but the data points we chose to focus on were reducing unexcused school and class absences, which have been high, reduce our failure rates in our core academic college prep classes, which has been something we've been working on for years, particularly because failures in academic classes in the early years is an indicator it's more likely to lead to dropouts, and then really trying to wrap our head around what we mean by social emotional wellness for high school students and how we measure that and how we sort of coordinate all of our programming to support students. So the upshot is, over the past 2 years, our daily attendance is improving and our class attendance is not. I've had the pleasure of meeting with other principals in the Greater Boston League, which is our sports league, and they're all struggling with the same thing, around roughly the same percentage. So we are working on instruction, social emotional supports, individual supports, consequences, rewards, privileges, everything we can throw at it to try to work with this group of students that continue to skip class. Next slide, please. So you can see for our daily class attendance, daily attendance actually was last year creeping up towards pre-pandemic levels, which hovered around 92, 93%. We attribute a lot of that to the work the deans have been doing in coordination with our director of student support, calls home anytime a student doesn't show up, calls home to find out why, and really making attendance plans, building that relationship with the family, bringing families in, really trying to figure out what the obstacles are to daily attendance and getting students in. Next slide, please. When we set out to do this goal, we knew class cuts were a problem, but we didn't have great ways of keeping track of data. So one thing I'm really proud of is the way we've cleaned up our data sources this year. We had actually a math teacher with a stipend, create this pretty great dashboard, which allows us to do a lot of work with our class cut data. This is probably reporting a little higher than the actual class cuts because it's really, it doesn't account for some attendance mistakes, but we can look at time of day, most frequent classes. I can tell you right now, lunch and last block are the classes that are cut the most, which subjects, with teachers, what kind of subjects, and it really gives us some real-time data to work with. But you can see on here that we have, if you go back one more, Erica, sorry. Go to the class cut slide. Yep, sorry, unexcused class absences. We have a group of, probably 80 kids, 90 kids that are cutting a lot of classes, and it's not really, hasn't been going down. Again, last year our data is not really clear, but it really hasn't been going down, and that's the group that we're really focusing on, particularly because we have been enforcing a longstanding policy at the school that if you have more than 6 unexcused absences in any given class in a quarter, the highest you can get is a 59. So that group of kids, that's not really an incentive and that's not working, so we're trying a lot of things to target that group of kids. I also want to point out that this shows most of our kids are doing the right thing and going to class. So next slide, please. We did a lot of work at the beginning of this. We did, the deans meet with students who cut classes, but we did an actual survey to collect data, not just anecdotal. These are nothing surprising here. Push factors: they don't like the teacher, they're confused, they already failed, they're falling behind, they don't have friends in class, they don't see the relevance of the course content, time of day. And pull factors are hanging out with friends, staying home, supporting their family or their guardians, not realizing the urgency of attendance or the importance of school. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but one of our main action steps, again, is just in improving that data, so we have a lot more real-time data, and we're still continuing to play with our systems. It's pretty overwhelming. We have 4 deans, but on any given day, they're getting 40 to 50 cut slips from different students, and sometimes it's the same student, but responding to all of these and coming up with the support plans for the students, it's a challenge, and so we're always looking at ways to make our systems better, but it's a pretty big volume of kids that we're really putting a lot of attention on. This isn't just about making a kid go to class. Tricia's going to talk about some of the work we've been doing with instruction. Obviously, more engaging classwork, the classwork feels more relevant, building a community in the classroom are going to be pull factors for a student to stay in class. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but we've had a lot of work really trying to look at the individual reason, each student as an individual, the reasons they're not going, and trying to give them the supports. We've been using, we got a grant, I think I talked about this with you last time, for an additional social worker, and she's meeting with all the ninth graders who are cutting classes, and we've taken a couple ninth graders and switched their schedule or got them in a class with a friend, and it's made a difference with a few of them. But we're just constantly looking at what's working, what's not working, and trying to monitor the impact of that class attendance policy, see how it's impacting students. And if Doreen and Cynthia were here, they're assistant principals, I mean, even for next year, we're doing some big out-of-the-box thinking of really trying to pull some of those kids in rather than pushing them out, and really trying to pull them into a smaller group, whether it's programming within the school or, something that meets a couple times a quarter, or different things we can do with groups to try to pull those kids in and get them more connected. Thank you. Next slide. I'm going to hand this over to Trish for the course failure rates.
Thank you, Ms. Kirsten. So in terms of our course failure rates, which are something we're focusing on as much as possible, this is one of the most important areas for our students. We are, if you're looking from school year 22 to 23, we have some improvements that we're able to show, but there are issues that still persist, particularly with historically marginalized populations, which are of great concern to us. If you look at subject areas, in English and social studies, we have failure rates for the 11th graders more than other levels. In science, it's actually 9th and 10th grade for those required courses. And in math, it's primarily 11th graders who take Algebra 2. We have new dashboards that the chairs are using, department chairs, to really examine these failure rates and to connect them with attendance, which is a huge a link there between failure rates and attendance. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go into the weeds here. This is just the math slide from 22 to 23. These are all the 4 core content areas where the gray bars are 22, green bars 23. This one, the graphs on the left are the core content courses, college prep. The ones on the right are English learner and special ed courses, and you can see what's popping there is the Algebra 2 failure rates for 23. Next slide, please. So this is for English. Same general layout. You're seeing their highest failure rates in this year for English 3. That's 11th graders, and some of that may be related to essay writing, which is a challenge for students. Next slide, please. In science there, you're seeing what pops is the biology and the chemistry for 9th and 10th graders. Next slide. And for social studies, you're also seeing that 9th grade failure rate here, that tall green bar, also perhaps related to essay requirements. So what's important to understand here are the demographics of failure rates, and you'd of course want to compare those to the demographics of the school. So what we're seeing here is that Latinx students who are making up 68% of the students who failed at least one course. Low-income students are greater than half of the percentage of folks who are failing at least one course, and males a greater than 50% rate of students failing at least one course.
If I can jump in on that, we didn't put the slide of the demographics of the school, but it's disproportionate for Latinx and for males. The 53% using the newest, latest metric is about on par with what we have at school.
Next slide, please. So in looking at this table here, whereby if you're looking at students who have failed a course, you can chunk them into categories of students who failed with fewer than 25 absences, or students who had more than 25 absences. So if you're looking in particular at math, science, and social studies, of course you see a huge jump in the failure rates of students who have more than 25 absences. It wouldn't be a big surprise, and a big jump as well for English, but just underscoring the link here between absenteeism and failure rates. Next slide, please. So what are we doing about this, importantly? So a couple of methods of, or tenets of improved instruction, whereby we're focusing closely on culturally responsive teaching in the brain, such that teachers are very much understanding what are the root causes of what may evidence as avoidance or disengagement or hesitancy, and trying to understand trauma approaches that would reflect the root cause of that behavior. Math and Science Department has been undergoing multi-year professional development regarding complex instruction, which has high standards and high levels of support, and also underscores the importance of really understanding and making relationships with students. Department chairs are monitoring, again, the root cause, and teachers as well, of failure rates. We're focusing on courses with high failure rates. We're making sure that our grade books and our late book policy are consistent, fair, and supportive, and not producing unanticipated obstacles for students. And we're focusing on teacher-student check-ins and ensuring that teachers are communicating with parents and guardians regarding failure rates.
So for updates on social emotional well-being, one of the first things we're trying to do is to get a handle on where our students are. When I came into this job at the beginning of 2022, I think I actually have my dates off here wrong, but the spring of, the spring of 2022, right before I took the job, when we gave the conditions of learning survey, about 200 students responded, which is only 15% of the student body, so that survey data was not very helpful to us. So our goal was to get it up to 80. We didn't quite get it there, but we got at least up to 54%, which I think, again, probably not comprehensive data, but a little better understanding of where our students were at. And this year, our counseling department has always been good about collecting data, but they're doing it in a format that makes it easier to measure some different points that we could look at social emotional well-being. And you see this theme through this. We're really trying to push creating these easy systems for us to access data and respond to it. Next slide, please. So just really quickly, when you do the conditions for learning surveys, the survey lumps together about 10 questions or so and categorizes them for the student support questions. And all of these you're going to see, the green obviously is the better what we want, and we're really hovering around, this one is just under 70%. Next slide, please. This one was for you, Dr. Ackman, based on your question from last time, when this question was asking if students had one adult in the building they could connect with. We're pushing, we're at 75 or 76% for that one. And then the next slide, please. The group of questions that are categorized together for social emotional learning, again, we're in the high 70s. So not terrible, but I actually have a question here, and this came up at our principals meeting this week. I don't know what other schools are like. I don't know how we compare to other schools on these questions. And actually, Courtney, Principal Goslin, had some ideas about some resources that could help us look about what this means. Obviously, we're not going to be satisfied until we get the kids in the yellow and the red up into the green, but it gives us something to work with as a baseline. Next slide, please. This is what the counseling department has been collecting. Safety assessments, that's for students who might be thinking about self-harm, are way down this year. Hospitals, even if you take into account that it's not the full year, hospitalizations actually look like they're about on track. 51As are way down. Riverside referrals, that's one of our outside counseling services. Adjustment counselor, again, we have both regular and special ed counselors, so that's up. And you can see last year we added a social worker, and we're having a lot of students connect with our social workers. And so you can see that we're doing a lot more of in-house, in-school support for our students. Next slide, please. So just moving forward, again, this theme, trying to make sure that we have, with a lot of help from Sam and her office, that we have a lot of dashboards so that we can access data more easily to make decisions in real time and for the future. We're going to, the attendance data is such that we have to continue to focus on this, and course failures and social emotional well-being. One thing we're hoping to do differently is to add, when you're looking at our budget for next year, is to add tutors. We have, a lot of volunteer tutors, but what we really want to add and pay is recent graduate tutors who can come in during the school day, work partial during the day, and know the teachers and know the grading system and know the work, and can also at the same time serve as mentors to our students and can be used in a push and pull out model. We're hoping that would address some of those kids who just feel uncomfortable or that they can't learn in the class, and if we can get them some real-time support from someone who understands them, then we're hoping that might have some impact. And then we're just constantly looking at our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 programming. We've heard a lot about restorative justice. We're putting that for all students, similar to what the Kennedy said on that Tier 1, but we're also looking at Tier 2, Tier 3. We're looking at getting students trained to run the circles, getting students creating more communities, and really leveraging the talent of our students to help build that feeling of community. And again, I wish if Doreen and Cynthia had been able to stay. They've got some really innovative, exciting ideas about reaching some of our more at-risk groups of students and just trying to improve our school culture as a whole. Thank you. I'll pass to Vidu.
Thank you. I will open it up to questions. I have Dr. Ackman and then Ms. Parrish.
Thank you. Through the chair, cleaned up data sources. Great. Thank you. That was impressive. So one is, well, I have two questions, so I can go in the queue. I guess my first question will be to you directly. Being that you are the only large urban high school in Somerville, understanding like the value of PLCs and like peer alike, and I understand that you, Principal Kirsten, have like amazing, brilliant, hardworking support staff, but is there any, there's only a handful of large urban high schools in the state. Like, do you have any ways of learning from them?
This is a great question. I actually was just meeting with Dr. Carmona last week about what supports I want for next year, and I'm looking to create, I have an informal one. The principals in the Greater Boston League historically used to meet and have started doing it again on our own. We'd like to do it more frequently. We're actually getting our student leaders together in May, but I was talking to him about trying to set up or tap into some other network, because I do think that that's where, Steve Marshall just referred to that, about how much you can learn from other schools and what they're doing. But we already sent out a survey to all the GBL principals about their attendance policies. We had some targeted questions, and we're trying to gather it all together and look at what they're doing and learn from each other.
Great. I have Ms. Parrish and then Mr. Bitone.
Follow up. First, thanks for the presentation, and I think the way you're using the data is really interesting, and kudos to Ms. Elagine and your team for getting the data in a way that they can use it. I'm curious about, you mentioned, I think, a couple of times that the essay requirements seem to be a source of student failure. I hate to say student failure because I don't want to put it on the students always. And I'm wondering how the district, this isn't really a question for you, but how the district might better prepare students in the lower grades if the students are in fact in our schools for K-8s, which isn't necessarily captured in these. Like, I don't know how many of the students who have gotten failing grades came in as freshmen or, came in 8th grade, so we don't know what their background is, but it does seem like maybe there's more we can do to prepare our students for these high school courses. Not really a question, I guess, a comment.
And I just want to clarify, it's a little bit of a hypothesis, and some of it stems from my time as department chair, but those junior year failure rates in social studies have been traditionally high, and it's when we move away from the in-class document-based questions to these research papers and larger essays, and almost all of the kids who were actually coming to school in class, it's because they didn't want to write that research paper. And we tried to prep a couple shorter ones, and then we had the longer one, and of course our credit recovery then becomes, you write the research paper. Like, you're not getting around writing the research paper, but it's this real resistance to doing that. It's only one piece of it. I think a lot of it has to do with juniors, and as Trish was saying, that Algebra 2, it tends to be the juniors in Algebra 2, and we have a lot of working theories about why these juniors are getting, sort of the bigger failure rates, so it's not just the essay writing. But I do appreciate your question. More prepared students, always good.
Mr. Bitone? And then Dr. Ackman again.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Krupchen. I also applaud your use of the data. This was just really nice to see, and there's the old adage of if you don't measure it, it doesn't exist, or you don't care about it. So glad to see what you're measuring, how you're measuring it, and how you're processing the data. I had very similar questions to Ms. Parrish. So I guess I'll just focus in on the science failure rates, which you focused on biology and chemistry, and I think you're one of the unique schools in the district where the work that happens in other schools actually impacts how you do. So I guess following up on Ms. Barish's question, I wonder, and this might be for you, it might be for Dr. Cremona, what additional work could we be doing in our middle schools to prepare our students for high school level science classes? I wonder, is there a lesson there? And then also, are we seeing differences among cohorts that come from different schools? And sort of, is there an opportunity there to learn from those schools that are performing a little, higher than others? And I guess it's a broad question, but thanks.
Sure.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for the question, and as always, thank you to the high school leadership team for all the work that you're doing. I think the point is a good one, and it's one that I and our team have been thinking closely about. If I'm responding more around the questions around essay writing and English, we are currently in the process of a needs assessment for grades K through 5 and a curriculum selection committee for grades 6 through 8 for English. So the needs assessment, hopefully, and we spoke about it with much more detail in our Ed Program subcommittee, but it will hopefully be able, it will take an inventory of where we are across multiple measures in terms of instruction, our assessment, our curriculum, all of those things in place, and see where we can best improve and kind of create an action plan for that. So we are thinking deeply about what the roots are here. Similarly, in the middle grades, particularly for science, but in all middle grades, we're thinking again about better curriculum first to start, or a unified curriculum across our middle grades. Science is something that Paula O'Sullivan has started the conversation around with middle grade science teachers at our last district-wide PD. So the conversations are starting. There was also recently a pull-out day, pull-out PD day, where meaning that there were subs to cover the classrooms of grades, of science teachers to go and kind of unit plan together, unit preview together, et cetera. So that's what we're currently doing, but I think that there's a lot more work to be done. I think there's a lot more work to be done in terms of vertical alignment. How do we best partner from PK all the way up to the high school, and where applicable scale, to really make sure that we are thinking about the foundations and what it looks like, once so I think it's an opportunity of growth. There's an area of growth there. The other thing I will say is that it's not lost on me that and I say this about when we look at, say, MCAS data, which I always qualify as it's one moment in time, and we know that. It's one moment in time, it's one piece of data. Our students are more comprehensive than this one number, and it is a tool that does show, as we've seen in plans, these persistent gaps that should not exist, these persistent, predictable, as the superintendent mentioned, gaps. And so I say that to say, when I look at MCAS data, I know, for example, in third grade, we're not just talking about a third grade experience, we're talking about all that led up to that. Similarly, as I look at, even though in the high school, for example, MCAS is subject specific, there are a lot of foundational things that could be in place that may be, but I don't know about consistently. So there is an area of evaluation and growth, hopefully a lot of educator leadership around that, who I think know best of what's happening in the rooms and are able to support with that growth in our curriculum development cycle. The final thing I'll say, this is longer, I didn't expect to talk this long, I'm sorry. sorry, SHS, this is your time. But the final thing I'll say about this is we are in the ed programs. Mr. Breton, you mentioned at the end around middle grades. We do have an upcoming meeting that I do not recall the date off the top of my head, but in next month, I think, or the month following, around middle grades curriculum. So to talk more about this very thing. But that said, back to SHS and the amazing school improvement
And
plan.
I want to add one thing you didn't mention, Jess, that I'm very excited about is this new structure for next year to bring together the grade level teachers from the different schools together more frequently. I saw a huge transformation in our curriculum and instruction when we started using PLCs at the high school, and I'm very excited to have that regular protected time for this grade level teachers across the district next year. I think that's going to have a big impact as well.
Great. Dr. Ackman.
Thank you. Through the chair, that ed programs will be at 2:45 on April 4th. You are, my colleagues anyone is welcome to attend, but if you don't, it will be recorded and eventually posted to the district's website. So that attendance policy, I just want to be clear that that's not something that came from here, that you are obligated to. That is your policy that you're working on. Great. And I had something else, but I didn't write it down. But thank you, and thank you for staying, and thank you to your colleagues who did stay and had to go. And Kathleen, I look forward to seeing you next time we're in ed programs.
Well, I just want to clarify, so the attendance thing has been in the program, or the handbook since I've had the job, but we actually decided attendance was just so bad that we were throwing everything. We're not just doing consequences, we're doing all sorts of supports. Right. But most schools do drops to 59 or no credit after a certain number of absences. Medford's is actually 3 per quarter. Ours is actually the most generous that I found. And so we just chose to start enforcing it for the past 2 years, and we're watching to see what happens. Got it. We're not just doing that blindly and think it's going to work, but as one piece of our comprehensive plan.
I do remember, through the chair, my question was, I assume with the attendance, you've also been working with the Full Circle, your colleagues at Full Circle, to sort of get ideas. I just assume that.
We get incredible ideas from them about building community and pulling kids in rather than pushing them out, but they have a much more generous attendance than we do.
Yes, I just meant strategies. Thank you.
Yeah, they're very good at pulling kids in and creating that community.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Parrish.
Thank you, through you, Chair Corruption. I just want to make sure I understood sort of the dynamic. It seems like in some cases, a student sees that they are failing a class and may start skipping class more, and then in other cases, they're already skipping class and then they see their grades decline. So it's working both ways, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And we do have, we don't lead with this, but for some kids, if it's really nothing's working, we might put an attendance plan in place where they just need to see some improvement, and we'll do more. Again, we don't lead with that because we really need kids to go to class. That's pretty basic ask of everybody. But there are attendance plans to put in class for students who are really struggling, which might individualize a little bit based on their needs and what they need to show some improvement.
I have a question, which is I apologize if I'm getting the name wrong. I believe it's the PATH program. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering how that plays into the absences and the students who do that program, and could it be expanded, or how does that work and play into
that? Is a great question. We are, I'm taking advantage of Ildefonso being new in his role and me being relatively new in the role to do a comprehensive look at, we have both PATH and Bridge and some other supports for our students who have the school anxiety and the school avoidance. And we need to do a comprehensive look of which kids those programs are capturing, what supports seem to be working, not working, and what kids we're totally missing. Because we have kids with school avoidance who aren't accessing either of these programs. We have another program called RISE, but we're going to look at all of those programs, how they fit together, who's accessing them based on school avoidance, which honestly is one of our trickier things when we're thinking about what to excuse and not excuse, what's not excused and what's excused. This deep-seated anxiety and school avoidance is real, and you still need to get kids to class, or at least to a place, where they can be doing work and pull them into the school. And it's actually one of the areas we've been talking with our student support services at Central a lot about what to do with that. And again, we're not the only school. This is unfortunately something we're seeing everywhere.
Great, thank you so much. With no further questions, we will say thank you so much and have a good night. All right, Dr. Carmona.
So we thank you, Alicia, and Principal Kirsten. We have had, I think these are the fourth or fifth school improvement plans that we have heard. We also have a different format of the school improvement plan that is through an update, a memo update. And so I don't know if, Sam, are you going to share something about those principals who are not actually presenting but have memo updates? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Through the chair. I just want to start off by saying big shout out to Principal Marshall and Principal Kirsten for their presentations tonight. And I just have a brief statement that I'll give, and then happy to answer any high-level questions. So last year, we resumed the school improvement process for the first time since before the COVID-19 pandemic. Coming out of the pandemic, it was and it remains to be clear that we need to take a close look at our systems, policies, and practices to better understand how to meet the needs of our students. The school improvement process has been one of the ways in which we've done this. Principals and their school improvement councils work to craft their plans with issues of academics, social emotional well-being, and equity in mind. They reviewed data, they identified root causes, they created goals, they selected strategies to address their goals and ways of monitoring progress and achievement of their goals. As of today, for the school year, you've heard from 5 of our schools, the Capuano, the East, the West, the Kennedy, and Somerville High School. You've heard their plans to improve the systems, policies, practices, and experiences for students in their school buildings. And now in your packets, you have the school improvement plans and updates from the 6 schools that did not present this year. So that includes the Argenziano, the Brown, the Healy, Winter Hill, and Next Wave and Full Circle. They've shared more about their improvement process and the progress monitoring of their plans, and I encourage everyone to take the time to review the amazing work that they've done throughout this year. I also want to just affirm the fact that just because these presentations are complete as of today does not mean that the work is done. We're only still in March. So these plans are living documents for each of the schools. So the monitoring of progress and the implementation of strategies will continue beyond today, as well as the reflection on these plans and the strategies and the progress made towards goals. So I think I speak for everyone when I say that we look forward to continuing to engage in continuous improvement and to elevate and meet the needs of students here in SPS.
Thank you for that. Are there any high-level questions? Obviously, questions can be answered offline as everyone digests these memos.
Sam, thank you very much. Sam, thank you very much. I want to take a minute to thank Sam for her amazing work. She provides feedback to principals. She helps them understand data and also frames things for her. So she has a district view vision of that, and I am really fortunate to be able to have her consistency from the years past, and it has been very helpful and instrumental in helping folks have the tools that they need to do the work. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, looks like Mr. Liu will give you a hand, and then Mr. Vitone has a question.
Thank you. No, and I guess just building on Dr. Carmona's comments, I have been consistently impressed with the quality of the documents that have been presented to us, which is a reflection, I think, not only of the administrative teams that we have in place at each of the schools, but also to your fine work. So anyway, just wanted to build upon that. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair Krepchen. Thank you. I completely understand that each school is going to have their autonomy, and they're going to address this in very different ways, but it's sometimes, from a school committee standpoint, it's kind of challenging to look at the different plans, because they're so variant, and I know they're going to pick different things to focus on, but it is hard for me as a school committee member at some level to sort of go, okay, how do I feel about where we're going with these different plans and make relative comparisons? I'm not saying I have an answer to this. I don't know if there's something in the future that might have some element that has some commonality across the schools, But, you know, if you guys don't recommend that, I'm not going to ask for it, but I'm just going to flag that, so thank you. But it doesn't reflect negatively on the quality and all the amazing work that's done.
No, that's definitely a great question, and we've already kind of started meeting to talk about this. But this summer, we definitely do want to reflect on this. Like we said, it's the first time we're doing this process since COVID, and it's my first time leading this process as well, so definitely open to feedback from folks about how to make, you know, all this information more accessible and more clear. Also open to feedback from principals as well, always. So definitely we'll be thinking that through this summer for next year.
If I may, through the chair, so that is part of the strategic planning process, and that question about alignment that Dr. Davis, Boston Davis mentioned a minute ago. Just a quick thing, if you think about the profile of a learner, we have one for the high school, is that right? If I ask, what does the one for the middle school looks like, we don't know the answer to that. And so to me, there's an alignment piece that has to cut through pre-K all the way through to 12th grade. And, you know, part of the coming into the district, we were respectful to already continue the trajectory that some of these plans have from years past. So I know this is a 3-year process, but we will be realigning some of those goals with the strategic plan process as well. So that's, yes, you're right about that. All the differences create some question about where are we heading and what's our through line. Yeah.
Thank you. With that, thank you, Ms. Elgin. Have a good evening. All right, more to your report, Dr. Carmona.
Yes, we still have a long way to go, so everyone bear with me. I know, sorry, we started, I wanted to share the good news of some of the awards that our teachers and students have received, but we had to respond to the actual immediate need of the Winter Hill need. So again, I wanted to start by saying that we have some wonderful news around some awards that students have received, and also I wanted to bring some of the students or some of the folks who are being honored into the space to do that more regularly. I think it's great to talk about them, but it's even better when we have those in front of you who actually can share and can be in flesh to talk to us.
I just want to say anytime you can get
Okay,
anyone to
so
come and talk to us about
I
it,
was
we're
going to
happy to.
propose that, and so we will do that because there are a lot of celebrations that we have to acknowledge, and they're very meaningful. I'm going to have Mr. Massa start with a quick celebration, and then we will have a couple more celebrations to share. So to Mr. Massa.
And just quickly comment, we should have cake when we have them. So go on.
Fair enough. Through the chair, as you heard a little bit earlier in public comment, Melissa Moore spoke about on Saturday was the soccer finals for middle school, both girls and boys. That's one of the activities. The intramural sports is a great way for our middle school students to participate, you know, in things that they really enjoy. I wasn't able to get to the girls' game. I was at my son's basketball practice, but I know it was between the West and the Healy, and I can tell you when I pulled into the East Somerville parking lot, you couldn't park anywhere near the school. There were so many people in that gymnasium that it just goes to show the support for, you know, our intramural athletics. The West did beat the Healy, so congratulations to them. No favoritism now, stop that. But again, it speaks to the quality of the intramural sports. I was there with my family for the boys' game. It was between Argenziano and Winter Hill. And I'm just going to give you a quick summary of that entire game because it was really intense. It was well attended. It was back and forth for most of the game. Winter Hill was up 6-5 with 30 seconds left. Argenziano scored, sent the game into overtime, and it's 2 5-minute periods. Argenziano scored in the first 5-minute period. Winter Hill scored with 30 seconds left in the second overtime period. So then they went to penalty kicks. And Winter Hill ended up prevailing. But more than, the victory, just being proud to watch the level of competition that the students had, to watch the show of respect that, each of the athletes had for each other. There was no trash talking out on that floor. They were playing soccer, for each other. At one point, one of the students from Argenziano, he got hurt, and while we were tending to him, everybody took a knee, and the entire gym was silent. So more than, the victory piece, I'm so proud to have been part of that sportsmanship, that competition and that respect level that those students had. And I just wanted, everybody here and in the public to know that, because we don't always see that these days. And both, teams from Argenziano and Winter Hill really exemplified that. So I wanted to give that update.
Great. So I can switch to Dr. Boston Davis. She has something to share about our Boston Debate League and two of our teams that were actually doing amazing work.
Yes, so thank you, through the chair, to continue on with this. This year was the inaugural year of the Kennedy and Brown combined debate team, which has been very successful. Regular weekly attendance of students in grades 5 through 8 is around 30 students, and the team is coached by Somerville parent David Nuremberg and Kennedy paraprofessional Silvana Dinka. And in one of its four tournaments in its inaugural year, the team placed third. So that's really exciting for the Kennedy Brown debate team. And then at the East Somerville Community School, their debate team, which includes students from the Healy and Winter Hill schools, they won an unprecedented 3 Boston Debate League tournaments, 3 out of the 4 that they participated in this season. It's led by East Somerville teacher Valkyria Gouveia and Valkyria Gouveia and Scott Weaver. And the East team was formed in 2017, and this year included 23 students from grades 6 through 8.
So the topic under debate under the Boston Debate League was actually the impact of homelessness, which incidentally is a big segue or a natural segue to the next recognition. So last week, one of our valued longtime staff, Regina Bertholdo, was recognized during a Boston Celtics home game as one of their Heroes Among Us award recipients. Regina founded and currently leads our Office of Basic Needs and Housing Supports. Here's what Boston Celtics had to say about her accomplishments. 20-year Somerville Public School staff member Regina Bertholdo has worked tirelessly to support students in a way that she herself desired after immigrating to the United States in the 80s. For the past 2 decades, Regina has developed support programs for students in need, including permanent shelter, transportation, clothing, and has been relentless in ensuring that academic success is not impacted by unstable housing. Her tireless efforts have drastically improved the outcomes for hundreds of local kids and their families for generations to come. Also of note, prior to her work in the Office of Basic Needs and Housing Support, Regina was the director of the Parent Information Center, now our enrollment office, which just celebrated its 29th anniversary. Congratulations for the well-deserved honors to our staff and our students. So. I also have to share an update on the entry plan, if I can continue. So we continue to move forward with the entry plan process to inform a strategic plan. And this week we'll be hosting 3 sessions, one with the students, staff, and families. And those sessions will be taking place on 3/21. And they include about 20 to 30 attendees that will be engaging on root cause analysis to get deeper into the data that we have reviewed so far. So gathering deeper analysis of the themes and ways in which our community is directly impacted by these areas of focus will help inform action steps as part of the upcoming strategic plan. So it is important to know that although we are hosting these engagement sessions, we also have already begun to look at the robust data that we have already analyzed to make evidence-based and inclusive decisions where necessary. The goal, again, is to maximize time and leverage community input whenever possible. We will continue to keep you updated as we develop the strategic plan. Just a quick note, we also, as we are building the strategic plan, we're making some decisions. There is, based on the overwhelming data about the middle school question, we will be creating a task force that will be looking at the questions that are coming already around the middle school question, or the middle school challenges. So we are moving both the process of root cause analysis, gathering more data, and also starting the process of solving some of the challenges. Yeah.
Ms. Patel?
Thank you, through you, Chair Krupchen. Just to clarify, when you say middle school challenges, you know, we've had some previous conversations about schools, physical schools, and you're talking more about the challenges that we're having in our current structure. You're not talking about different structures for middle school.
To be honest, I think we have talked about the challenge. I think it would be great to norm around what the challenge is, because if you ask teachers, I hear some versions. If you ask students, I hear some challenges. If I hear from this committee also, there has been a structural concerns about, like, do we go middle school, do we go K through 8? So I think that I want to have the process itself give us some answers in terms of some of the data, preliminary data that we're gathering.
Ms. Patel? And then Mr. Beaton.
Oh, yeah, just to clarify. So it's kind of more of a data gathering around what the challenges are, as opposed, I just want to be clear, because the committee has not said, like, let's go look at a middle school or not. Questions have come up. There's been some advocacy, but I don't think we've given any direction. And you specifically said, hey, are you asking me to do this? And we all said, no, we're not asking you to do this. So I just want to be clear that it's not that you are putting it together a task force to look at whether or not we should build a middle school.
Oh, no, that's way outside of my
That's what I said.
jurisdiction.
I want to make sure that it's clear that this is about what the challenges are.
That's not within my pay grade. Anything that has to do with buildings is not me. But I have heard the question around the structural thing as being a challenge that impacts the students. And so before we even talk about the structural issue, there are things that we can do internally around how we are configuring the experience of the middle school students and also the learning experience itself. So I think there's more things that I really want to get granular, because I think that there is a lot of, depending on who you ask, you get a different version of the challenge. So, but again, if at some point out of that, someone will say, well, we need to look at the structural issue, that will be something that will have to be created under a different space.
A separate activity, perfect.
Correct.
I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
No, I'm not suggesting a new model at this point.
Mr. Patel?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I think we need to be very careful when we use the word structural, because that in and of itself creates some confusion, even in my own mind. But I just want to thank you for your leadership on this, Dr. Carmona, and I welcome this news that you're looking to create a task force to start thinking about these structural questions.
Let's call them programmatic challenges.
There we go, programmatic challenges. Thank you.
Okay, so I also have another update, and this is in regards to conversations that we have had with the students as well as staff around discussions in regards to the ongoing violence in Palestine and Israel. And I wanted to take this time to share my response to the incredibly important discussion that have taken place. So I share that with you, a letter with you in your packet as well. So I'm writing to extend this is my response. So I'm writing to extend a heartfelt thank you for engaging in an open discussion with me about the ongoing violence in Palestine and Israel, which has taken the lives of so many, particularly innocent children. Your advocacy is not only commendable, but it also inspires me as an individual and as the leader of Somerville Public Schools. I recognize that we can do more to address some of the concerns you rightfully raised. It is not lost on me how incredibly challenging it is to teach young minds, or conversely, to come ready to learn as a student in the midst of the kind of violence and trauma that is taking place and is being displayed across various media platforms. Personally, I am profoundly troubled by the disproportionate impact the violence has on children, women, and innocent civilians. Still, I understand that for some of us, the violence taking place in Palestine and Israel is closer to home, as I have heard personally from staff and students about how their families have been directly affected. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to delve deeper into how Somerville Public Schools can better support students and staff through emerging conflicts, including the atrocities in Israel and Palestine. I truly rely on your engaged feedback so that together we can prioritize safety and well-being, academic excellence, and a profound sense of belonging for everyone who enters our doors. I have reflected on our conversation, and I took away critical next steps that I'm committed to addressing in collaboration with you, with all of you. First, ensure clear and consistent communication with educators and staff surrounding instruction, conversation, and access to resources related to emerging conflicts. And second, enhance systems that enable students to easily identify and access trusted adults, feel empowered, and empowered to report concerns, ask thoughtful questions, and have a voice in decision-making. While these next steps may not encompass all that we need to do as a community to fully address the concerns you shared, I remain committed to working through these complex issues with all of you in a comprehensive and thoughtful manner, with the ultimate goal of ensuring an inclusive learning environment for all our students. Once again, thank you for your advocacy, courage, and collaboration. With gratitude. So I'm sharing with you my response to the students and the staff I met with. And you know, I'm really impressed with the commitment and their engagement, and I want to make sure that that is noted. That is the end of my superintendent report.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that heartfelt response. Is there anything you want to share from the personnel report?
We had some, yes, I'll be brief. We have some retirements, and I want to recognize some folks who have been here for us for quite some time. So Joy Nickel, a special education resource room teacher, she has been here with us for 27 years, is being retired. Tracy Small, also our guidance department chair. Kristen Fudge, a special education resource room teacher, she has been with us for 35 years. And Mary White, principal account clerk. So those are the folks who actually are retiring, and so I think we should recognize their contribution to our system. I think there's also a new hire, Joey Reploglu. He is a special education teacher, and he's hired right now. And just a quick note that the Human Resources is gearing up for summer school postings, hires, and awaiting the green light to post for the 24-25 school year, and making sure that we meet all the school deadlines around that. So excited about the new hires and celebrating our folks who have provided so much to our community.
Great, thank you for that. We actually only have one report, subcommittee report to approve, because the rule is one we actually did last meeting. So I will entertain a motion for the finance and facilities.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Barish. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to MSBA update. Dr. Carmona?
Yes, so the update, I know we have a call for applicants for a school building committee that was sent out, and the applications are due to the city on April 5th. We're seeking for four volunteers. Also, the city is establishing an advisory group, and we just heard from the mayor on that. The details will be more explicit as the days come. We also are in the process of submitting the certificate of compliance that was due early in April, and it has already been signed by the chair as well as the the mayor and the superintendent. So that's really my SBA update. It's not really much to it.
Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I wanted to request the superintendent to ask the mayor to put in a memo format some of that information you shared about the 18 months. There was a lot to digest there in terms of the process and why it's not slowing things down. And so if that can be documented in some type of memo format to the school committee, and that would be helpful.
Can you just, I'm a little tired, can you just put it in writing to make sure that I get all the details? Just at a high level, they're running parallel. Some are moving faster than others. And we wanted to make sure that parents who really wanted to talk about the school's options, all that planning happens in an 18-month period and needs to inform the rest of the SBA process. So it was a way to commit people to stay for 18 months versus another group or for people who would stay 7 to 10 years, ideally, with the process. But we can put it in writing.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do we have a short collaborative report? Dr. Ackman? No problem. We can table that till our next meeting. The spring office hours, I can't remember when we decided to do that in finance, but I think coming up in the next few weeks or so. Is somebody willing to volunteer to coordinate them? Anyone?
I will.
Well,
I will happily.
great, thank you so much. It's not a huge ask. It's basically a spreadsheet with everyone giving you their hours and sometimes harassing members to get them to give you their hours. That's actually the biggest part of the job.
If you gave me access to a spreadsheet, you've made my day. Thank you.
Okay, great. That brings us to, oh, yes, thank you. Ms. Parrish.
Thank you. Through you, last time we held office hours, some of us attempted to hold virtual hours, and it didn't work. So I just wanted to check in to see if we knew if the technology exists to hold virtual office hours, or if we should not plan to do that.
A good question, and let me check in with the team and get back to you. But it's a great question. Thank you for flagging that. Okay, with that, we have the scale unit. We approved it back in an exec in December, just never made it to a public meeting. So that's why we're doing it now. Dr. Ackman.
I move to approve the integrative collective bargaining agreement between Somerville School Committee and the Union of Scale Unit D, Somerville Educators Union, Massachusetts Teachers Association, National Education Association for the period of September 1, 2022 through August 31, 2024, and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
I have motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Parrish. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the Student Opportunity Act. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the Somerville Public Schools Student Opportunity Act plan as presented by the superintendent.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Mr. Green. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to an acceptance of grants.
I move to accept all federal entitlement and continuation grants and all state continuation grants awarded to the Somerville Public Schools listed below from the State Coordinated Family and Community Engagement, CFCE, an additional $13,157 to serve 2 more families.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Patone. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Items from committee members. Mr. Green?
I know that we've discussed one-on-one. I want to encourage you to continue looking into the adoption of consent agenda rules especially since it feels like we're going to be having more substantive meetings for the foreseeable future. So if we can, anything we can do to streamline.
So I'm going to ask Ms. Barish where that stands, because I actually sent it to rules because our agenda is actually a policy that we have.
So we did discuss it, and we did not come to a conclusion yet. I will add that to my list of things.
Great, thank you so much. And if I can be of any help in that process, please let me know. Any other items from board members? Seeing none, since the vice chair had to leave, I have our condolences. The school committee would like to extend our condolences to the families of Bernard Morgan, father of Mary Beth Morgan, kindergarten teacher at Winter Hill Innovation School, Elaine DeMora, mother of Wendy Roberge, special education department head at the Arthur D. Healy School and West Somerville Neighborhood School, Michael Marujo, brother of Deborah Marujo Smith, paraprofessional at the Michael E. Capuano Early Childhood Center, and Joel Murray, husband of Denise Kamara Murray, nurse at the Albert F. Argenziano School and father of Ciara Murray, Community Schools High School helper. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.